Get ready to dive into the story. Let's jump right in! In a world where humanity was close to extinction, an evil god named Vindra appeared from the sky with his army of monsters, bringing destruction everywhere. The war went on, and as the monsters advanced, they were wiped out in an instant by magic. These powerful magic users were humanity's last hope, the strongest mages standing against Vindrake. As the monsters charged, the heroes were already preparing their spells. Without delay, they launched long-range magic at the creatures. Setsuna declared that this would be the end for Vindrake. As the smoke cleared, he began casting a spell that combined all 6 magical elements. At the same time, he used his elemental explosion spell while the other heroes stood ready to assist him. Everyone gave their full support to Setsuna, making sure the spell was as strong as possible. But just when they thought they had won, Vindrake appeared again as the smoke faded. Even after taking the full force of their attack, he stood there without a single scratch. The heroes couldn't believe what they were seeing. How had he survived? Before they could think further, they started preparing another spell. But Setsuna stopped them, saying they needed to observe him first. When they attacked again, their magic vanished before it could even touch Vindrake. Setsuna was shocked. Vindrake laughed at them, calling them fools for stepping into his domain. His words shook the group, and they turned to Setsuna for answers. But even he didn't know what to do. Before they could react, something invisible struck one of their teammates. A dark-haired girl trembled, saying she was running out of mana. The battlefield turned into chaos as monsters took advantage of their confusion. A giant serpent suddenly lunged and swallowed one of their companions whole. Anger filled Setsuna as he yelled for them to stop. He quickly started casting another spell, but before he could finish, Vindrake appeared behind him. When he turned, it was too late. A sharp pain shot through his shoulder as he was badly injured. Setsuna looked around in horror. The entire country was in ruins. Vindrake declared that their fight was useless. But Setsuna refused to give up. Gathering the little magic he had left, he threw a punch at Vindrake. To his surprise, the attack created a hole in Vindrake's arm. Setsuna was stunned. He hadn't expected such weak magic to work. It was a low-tier spell, yet it had an effect. That was when he realized something important. Maybe this was the way to defeat him. But in his current state, he was too weak to fight. Vindrake smirked and said this was all someone like him could do. Suddenly, Setsuna's necklace started glowing with energy. It was a gift from his headmaster. A memory came to him. When he was younger, he had once asked his headmaster why he was given the necklace of rebirth. The headmaster explained that the necklace contained the spirit of time, allowing the wearer to undo their past regrets. However, Setsuna had once thought it was useless and had considered leaving it behind. Seeing this, the headmaster simply laughed, saying it was expected from someone at the top of the magical academy. He then told Setsuna that one day, he would definitely need it. Back in the present, Setsuna clutched the necklace tightly. He finally understood his biggest regret, not using it earlier. But now, he had another chance, and this time, he vowed to win for sure. A bright light surrounded him, and before he knew it, he was back at his academy. Still feeling a bit confused, he looked around. A friend patted his back, saying it was his turn. That's when Setsuna saw Leo standing nearby. He was shocked. Leo had disappeared long before the evil god appeared. That's when it hit him. He had really gone back 10 years in time. Clenching his fists as he looked at the academy, he once again declared that he would defeat the evil god. However, Leo repeated that it was his turn, reminding him that they were at the blessing ceremony. With that, Setsuna walked toward the professor, while the other students whispered among themselves. Setsuna was well known, not just for his skills, but because he was the greatest genius of the academy, possessing an affinity for all paths of magic. The professor opened a book, and powerful magic poured out from it. In the world of magic, there were different paths, and to use a spell, one had to master a specific technique. This made learning multiple types of magic extremely difficult. The professor then called out to Setsuna, asking him to choose his magical path. In his mind, Setsuna thought that long, range magic would be the obvious choice. Magic was fueled by mana and mainly used to attack enemies from a distance. With long-range spells, most opponents could be defeated easily. Normally, this would be the best choice for someone like him. But he knew the truth. Even if he became the strongest mage in the world, that kind of magic would be useless against Vindrake. So, he did something unexpected. Instead of choosing long-range magic, he turned away. The crowd around him fell silent, shocked by his decision. Even Leo was confused. That morning, Setsuna had told him he would choose long-range magic. But now, he had chosen melee combat magic instead. The professor reminded him that this path focused on physical enhancement and had long been abandoned. Choosing it meant throwing away his bright future. But Setsuna already knew all of this. He also knew that this was the only way to defeat Vindrake. So, without hesitation, he raised his hand and chose the melee combat path. Everyone around him gasped in surprise. Looking down, he saw the new symbol that had appeared on his hand. But no one believed that the famous Setsuna, the Academy's genius, would choose such a path. The professor closed his book, then smiled, saying that he was interested in teaching Setsuna everything he knew. If Setsuna truly mastered this path, he could become the strongest mage of all, and together, they would achieve glory. Setsuna thought to himself, it would all be meaningless in 10 years. In 10 years, humanity would be defeated. In just 5 years, Vindrake would appear. Even though he had all the knowledge from his past life, he had no real experience with melee combat magic. After some time, an announcement was made. The second-year students were told to go to their respective classrooms. Setsuna looked around for Leo, but he was nowhere to be seen. So, he approached a student and asked if they could show him the way. But instead of helping, the student quickly stepped away, avoiding him. As he stood there, he noticed the whispers around him. People were talking, but he couldn't understand what they were saying. In reality, the other students thought he was just showing off by choosing melee combat magic. Setsuna realized that people were treating him differently just because of his choice. Since no one would help, he decided to find the way himself. He thought there might be a campus map in the courtyard. As he walked in that direction, he suddenly heard someone casting a spell. That was strange. Why would there be a fight here? Curious, he followed the noise and saw a red-haired girl confronting a man. She demanded that he return her brooch, saying her mother had given it to her. The group of men around her commented that the brooch was a high-class mana storing tool, and someone like her shouldn't be using it. Setsuna quickly realized what was happening. The girl was from the melee combat department, while the others were from the long-range magic department. The man holding the brooch had fire in his hands. He sneered at the girl, telling her to take it back with her weak melee combat magic. Then, he threw a fireball at her. The girl managed to dodge just in time, enhancing her speed with melee combat magic. But Setsuna noticed a problem. While she could dodge the attacks, she wouldn't be able to hit him back because of the range. Gritting her teeth, the girl shouted that she would never let them keep something her mother gave her. Then, she cast a spell, forming a glowing mana blade in her hand. The man only laughed. "That dagger will never reach me," he said. A fireball shot toward her, crashing against the mana blade and knocking it to the ground. The man smirked. "Pathetic," he said. "Just give up. No matter what you do, I'll always be stronger than you." Then, he prepared to launch another fireball at her. Just as it seemed like it was all over for the red-haired girl, Setsuna dashed forward. At the last second, he pulled her away from the attack, saving her. The 3 men watching were shocked by his sudden move. Ignoring them, Setsuna turned to the girl. "Do you know where the melee combat department is?" he asked. "I need someone to show me the way." The girl was completely confused. Meanwhile, a student in the background recognized him. "Wait, is that Setsuna Cromwell?" they whispered. But looking at his hand, it was obvious. He had chosen melee combat magic. The blonde man grinned. "This is perfect," he said. "Since he specializes in melee combat, we can hit him as much as we want." Setsuna already knew that melee combat magic was considered weak, but he also understood that strength wasn't just about raw power. It was about how magic was used. Observing the fight, he could already see flaws in how combat magic was applied, which meant there was plenty of room for improvement. The red-haired girl tried to stop him, but before she could, the blonde opponent had already begun casting another spell. Without hesitation, Setsuna enhanced his leg strength with mana, allowing him to move at incredible speed. Fireballs shot toward him, but at this pace, dodging them was effortless. Realizing he had complete freedom of movement, he pushed himself further, testing how far he could go. His opponent, growing frustrated, intensified his attacks, conjuring even larger fireballs in both hands. But no matter how many he launched, Setsuna avoided them with ease. Then, with a precise strike of his mana blade, he did something unexpected. He sliced through one of the fireballs, making it dissipate instantly. The spectators were stunned. Even the girl, who had some knowledge of melee combat magic, hadn't thought that was possible. But for Setsuna, it was clear in a battle of magic, skill and control mattered just as much as raw power. His ability to finely manipulate mana allowed him to cut through magic itself, a technique that could make melee combat magic far more useful than most people assumed. Desperate, the blonde opponent decided to cast a high-level spell, despite his friends warning him against it. However, he never got the chance to finish. Before he could complete the incantation, Setsuna closed the distance in an instant. Fell over the courtyard. No one had expected melee combat magic to be this effective. One of the onlookers even questioned whether such power was really possible with this type of magic, but the outcome spoke for itself. Setsuna had overpowered a stronger opponent simply by using speed, precision, and technique. Raising his hand, he demanded the brooch back. Defeated and out of options, the blonde opponent reluctantly handed it over before leaving with his group. Setsuna returned the brooch to the red-haired girl, who accepted it gratefully. She introduced herself as Leah Rozuil, and while she already knew who Setsuna was, she couldn't understand why someone as famous as him had chosen melee combat magic. He didn't bother explaining. It wasn't something people would believe anyway. Instead, he simply asked for directions to the melee combat department, and after a brief pause, she agreed to guide him there. With that, the encounter ended, and they headed off together. As they hurried to the orientation, Leela mentioned that it had already started, urging Setsuna to pick up the pace. Walking through the vast campus, he quickly realized just how unpopular melee combat magic was. The department was tucked away at the farthest end. On the way, Leela questioned how he had managed to form a mana blade. Setsuna explained that it was all about mana control. Unlike most people who saw combat magic as a force approach, he believed it had far more potential when applied creatively. If he could master it, there was even a chance he could counteract the evil god's dissipator, a power that negated magic itself. The scene shifted. Setsuna sat before the headmaster, who, removing his gloves, revealed something unusual. His hands bore two distinct magical paths. One was clearly summoning magic, but the other was unlike anything Setsuna had ever seen. When he asked about it, the headmaster remained cryptic, saying the truth would be revealed when the time was right. He then confided in Setsuna, entrusting him with the knowledge of his second magic. Something he had never spoken of before. Given that the previous headmaster had been assassinated right after an emergency involving the evil god, Setsuna knew this hidden power carried grave risks. Still, if he could learn it, he might be able to alter the course of fate. Snapping back to reality, Leela announced that they had arrived at their destination. Still deep in thought, Setsuna couldn't help but wonder, what would it take to earn the headmaster's recognition? The professor of the melee combat magic department didn't seem pleased by their late arrival. When Leela tried to explain, he dismissed it as unimportant. To him, nothing they had accomplished before mattered now. The moment Setsuna set foot in this department, his worth was reduced to nothing. Approaching him, the professor spoke with disdain, making it clear that he saw Setsuna as just another failure for choosing this path. But Setsuna wasn't one to back down. If the professor thought melee combat magic was worthless, why was he even teaching it? His words struck a nerve. The professor, irritated by his defiance, held himself back from outright lashing out but made it clear. If Setsuna was so confident, he would have to prove himself. The first test was brutal. A green-haired student attempted to strike a massive black iron stone, but his attacks barely even left a mark. No one had managed to crack it, let alone extract the crystal embedded inside. The professor explained that this challenge determined ranking. Failure meant punishment. Despite the students' best efforts, none of them knew how to break through such an unyielding material. Growing more frustrated, the professor led Setsuna to an unoccupied stone. He had 10 minutes to succeed. 10 minutes to prove that melee combat magic was more than just a useless relic of the past. With the weight of expectations pressing down on him, Setsuna stepped forward, ready to show them all what combat magic was truly capable of. Lila couldn't help but feel that the test was unfair. Breaking that stone in just 10 minutes was impossible, yet the teacher remained indifferent. Setsuna stepped forward, placing a hand on the massive black iron stone. His action was met with mockery. The teacher sneered, telling him to kneel and apologize if he wanted extra time. But instead of backing down, Setsuna calmly stated that he wouldn't need 10 minutes. Just 10 seconds would be enough. His words were met with disbelief. Even Layla thought he was being reckless. The stone was massive, made of an exceptionally durable material, and even the instructor himself had only managed to break it after 30 minutes. Yet, with an unwavering look in his eyes, Setsuna made it clear there would be no second chance. As he focused his energy, he reminded himself of his ultimate goal. Gaining the headmaster's recognition meant proving he was the best, starting here and now. With that resolve, he summoned his mana blade and charged at the stone. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The teacher scoffed, ready to humiliate him further. But then, the stone suddenly crumbled, breaking apart from the inside out. Setsuna calmly reached into the rubble and retrieved the embedded crystal, repeating his claim. It had only taken 10 seconds. Gasps filled the training ground. Layla and the other students stared in astonishment at what they had just witnessed. But the teacher refused to believe it. To him, it had to be cheating. If even he couldn't break that stone in 10 minutes, how could a mere student do it in seconds? Setsuna, unshaken, suggested that maybe the teacher should go back to being a student instead. Irritated, the instructor prepared to retort, but a sudden voice interrupted. Someone placed a hand on his head and questioned whether he was intimidating the students. The teacher froze. Standing before him was Lionel, the head instructor. Lionel observed the remains of the stone, and, without hesitation, dismissed any accusations of cheating. Setsuna had simply read the stone's mana flow and struck its weakest point, something even an instructor had failed to notice. Turning to the rest of the class, Lionel announced that Professor Zachary would now demonstrate mana defense. Without warning, Lionel prepared to throw a punch, stating that if Zachary had been training properly, he wouldn't die from it. Zachary stammered, attempting to protest, but it was too late. Lionel's punch sent him flying. Watching the absurd scene unfold, Setsuna couldn't help but wonder what kind of person Lionel was. As if sensing his thoughts, Lionel approached, patting him on the back and acknowledging his skill. Though he was in a lower-ranked department, Lionel simply wished him luck. But Setsuna had no intention of settling for just that. He declared that he would become the best in the class, regardless of their department ranking, and wouldn't lose to anyone. Lionel smirked, recognizing the determination in his eyes. Impressed, he decided to teach Setsuna the fundamentals of magic. As he walked away, he reflected on the unexpected development. He had already chosen someone to be the class representative, but perhaps Setsuna was about to change everything. Shortly after, Lionel reintroduced himself to the class, and, without delay, announced their next challenge. They needed to select a representative for the upcoming interclass match. The interclass matches were a major event where 8 magical departments competed against each other. Each department selected a representative, and the winner of the tournament was determined through a series of battles. This was the moment when Setsuna gained recognition from the director, making it crucial for him to secure his place as the department's representative. Just then, Lono called for Setsuna, revealing that he wasn't the only one who had successfully extracted the crystal. Someone else had done it before him, using only raw physical strength. Turning to the side, Setsuna noticed a figure, and Lono introduced him as Drago Red. Drago immediately questioned if Setsuna was indeed a Cromwell, and was curious about why he had joined this department when he clearly had the talent to excel in other areas. Setsuna briefly explained that he had important reasons for choosing combat magic, but Drago cut him off. He proudly stated that his family had been known for their combat magic skills for generations, and he himself had been training for 17 years. Without warning, he unleashed a powerful punch, sending a fierce gust of wind in Setsuna's direction. It was clear that Drago wasn't willing to hand over the representative position without a fight. Unfazed, Setsuna stood his ground, ready to accept the challenge. Before anything could happen, Lono stepped in and declared that the match would take place in 1 week. As Drago walked away, he warned Setsuna not to back out, making it clear that he intended to fight with full force. The situation quickly became a hot topic of discussion, and Lila, concerned for Setsuna, asked if he thought he could win. He admitted that in his current state, he had no chance against Drago. However, he had a plan. Later, while walking, they arrived at a massive, ancient tree. Lila was curious about it, and Setsuna explained that it was his secret training ground. He was confident that with this place, he could grow 3 times stronger. The tree was over 1,000 years old, and as they stood before it, a strange energy radiated from it. Lila was puzzled by the glowing light coming from the tree, and Setsuna explained that it was the tree's blessing. Only those recognized by the sacred tree received this gift, which allowed him to recover his mana continuously. As long as he trained there, he wouldn't have to worry about running out of energy. He just needed to push himself to the limit. Lila was amazed by it all, but she knew that Drago was born with natural strength as a melee combat mage. Even so, she was determined to help Setsuna, recalling how he had once helped her retrieve her lost brooch. His determination left her feeling inspired. Meanwhile, in the training room, Layla was shocked to see Drago training aggressively, lifting heavy weights without pause. She overheard him asking a professor about the black steel stones in the garden. When the professor asked if he intended to break them, Drago denied it, saying he planned to use them as weights for his training. Watching from a distance, Layla couldn't believe what she was seeing. Lee hurried to find Setsuna, worried about how he was handling the situation. Meanwhile, Setsuna sat beneath the sacred tree, calmly reading a book on martial arts. Seeing this, Lee grew frustrated, telling him that this wasn't the time to be so relaxed. She explained everything she had learned. Drago was doing push-ups using black steel stones. However, Setsuna remained unfazed, as this level of training was expected from someone like Drago. He reassured her that everything was going according to his plan. As a faint aura flickered in his eye, he began explaining his approach. Physical enhancement wasn't just about strength. It allowed control over the nervous system and mana flow. By focusing on a specific area, he could enhance its power. If he needed more speed, he would concentrate on his legs. For increased dexterity, he would focus on his hands. The same principle applied to memory. By concentrating on his head, he could sharpen his mind. With that, he threw off his coat and swiftly kicked the air, demonstrating his agility. Then, wielding his mana blade, he executed precise, rapid movements, leaving Lee astonished. Despite her amazement, Setsuna insisted that it still wasn't enough. Suddenly, pain shot through his body, and he collapsed to the ground, revealing a deep wound on his hand. He explained that pushing his muscles to their limits with physical enhancement had caused the injury. Yet, he didn't seem concerned. As long as he focused on healing, he could rebuild his body even stronger. Lee, worried, urged him to find a less punishing method. However, Setsuna knew that defeating Drago required him to give everything he had. His opponent had spent years mastering combat magic, and with only a week to prepare, Setsuna was ready to break and rebuild himself over and over again, if that's what it took. Bala remarked that such training would be painful, but it reminded Setsuna of his past. There was a time when he couldn't use magic at all, yet he practiced every day. No matter how many times he failed, he never gave up. His progress had been slow, but he improved bit by bit. Because of that experience, he knew that as long as he kept growing stronger, this challenge wouldn't break him. Over the following days, Setsuna and Lee trained together. Eventually, she realized that he wasn't just naturally talented. He was someone who worked harder than anyone else. Finally, the day of the match arrived. Drago noticed Setsuna standing in the arena and acknowledged that he hadn't backed down. As the representative of the combat department, Drago declared that he wouldn't lower himself to anything less than his full strength. With that, Lono prepared to signal the start of the battle. Their eyes locked, both refusing to back down. The moment the match began, Setsuna dashed forward and delivered a kick, but Drago blocked it with ease. Not slowing down, Setsuna slid and launched a rapid series of kicks, forcing Drago to retreat. However, Drago had blocked every attack with his mana defense. Then, without hesitation, Drago charged at him, his fist glowing with energy as he prepared to strike. As the smoke cleared, Setsuna stood his ground, having successfully defended against Drago's powerful blow. The crowd was left in stunned silence. Setsuna knew that if he had taken that hit directly, it would have been the end for him. Undeterred, Drago lunged at him again, but Setsuna dodged with precise movements. Drago continued his relentless assault, throwing punch after punch, yet Setsuna did nothing but defend. Frustrated, Drago demanded to know why he wasn't fighting back. Despite his endurance, Setsuna's body was clearly growing weaker. Drago smirked, confident that this was the end for his opponent. Watching from the stands, Lee couldn't hide her worry. Had all of Setsuna's training been for nothing? However, Lono noticed something odd. While it appeared as though Setsuna was barely hanging on, he was, in fact, perfectly countering Drago's attacks using his mana control. Every strike that landed was being reflected in a way that minimized its impact. Drago, still attacking, spoke through clenched teeth. He raged about how melee combatants had always been looked down upon by those in power. His family had excelled only in hand-to-hand combat, and for that, they had suffered years of humiliation. But now, he intended to change everything with his own hands. Summoning a spell, Drago conjured his mana blade. Setsuna responded in kind, and the two clashed, their blades sparking with each strike. As their intense sword fight continued, Setsuna couldn't help but remember what others had once said to him. How they had doubted his chosen path. In that moment, he understood Drago's pain. Yet, despite their shared struggles, Setsuna knew they were both aiming for something far greater than proving their worth to others. Without giving Drago time to react, Setsuna shattered his opponent's blade. Drago only grinned in response, unshaken, and the fight resumed. Activating his physical acceleration enhancement, Setsuna launched a fierce attack. Drago, however, blocked it, standing his ground. From the stands, Lee felt a surge of hope. Setsuna was managing to keep up with Drago despite his opponent's overwhelming strength. While Drago's offense and defense were near flawless, Setsuna's control and adaptability were just as impressive. The battle was still anyone's to win. Realizing he needed an opening to land a decisive blow, Setsuna pressed on. But Drago wasn't holding back either. Conjuring another mana blade, he roared and swung a devastating strike. Setsuna barely dodged, sensing that Drago had poured all his remaining mana into this final attack. Looking back, Setsuna saw that he was now cornered. Drago grinned, knowing his opponent had no space left to evade. Concentrating all his strength, he prepared to deliver the finishing blow. But just as his fist made contact, something was off. His strike had landed on nothing but an afterimage. Setsuna's voice rang out behind him, explaining that by focusing his mana on a single spot, he could briefly create an afterimage of himself. Before Drago could react, Setsuna appeared at his back, delivering a final, decisive attack. The entire arena erupted in shock. Leono, realizing what had happened, announced that Setsuna had executed a perfect counterattack, seizing the advantage at the last moment. "The match is over! The winner!" Setsuna Cromwell. Still lying on the ground, Drago gritted his teeth and struggled to get up. The sight of Drago standing after taking a direct hit shocked everyone. However, the attack had been controlled so it wouldn't be fatal. Setsuna extended a hand toward Drago. But instead of taking it, Drago asked why he fought. Setsuna responded that he fought to protect those important to him, and to ensure that nothing was ever taken from him again. He declared his determination to become the strongest. Drago, understanding his resolve, accepted defeat. Setsuna then realized that Drago's strength could be a valuable asset in the battle against the evil god. Later, at the gathering place, Liano lifted Setsuna's arm and officially declared him the representative of the melee combat department. A few days later, Lonel informed Setsuna that it was time for the representatives to meet and warned him to stay alert. As Setsuna entered the meeting room, he was immediately mocked by a blonde-haired man with glasses. The man smirked, implying that Setsuna had only come to embarrass himself. When Setsuna noticed the emblem on his uniform, he realized this man was the representative of the enchantment magic department. Without warning, the blonde man stepped on Setsuna's foot and smugly announced that he would be his opponent in the first round. He mentioned that in the past century, no one from the combat department had ever won the tournament. Instead of reacting with anger, Setsuna casually stepped on the blonde man's foot in return, pretending it was some kind of formal greeting. His sarcastic response annoyed the blonde man, who glared at him. Unfazed, Setsuna confidently stated that the combat department would win this year. The blonde man scoffed, telling him not to say reckless things. Before tensions could rise further, the director arrived. His presence commanded immediate respect, and everyone quickly bowed. He reminded them to wait until the matches started before engaging in unnecessary fights. Observing the situation, Setsuna recognized that everything was unfolding just as it had before his regression. Meanwhile, a pink-haired girl politely greeted the director, promising to do her best in the tournament. Setsuna glanced at her and instantly remembered Carol. Her presence hadn't changed. She had been a formidable opponent in the past, and even though he had defeated her before, he knew he couldn't underestimate her. The director then addressed the gathered representatives, acknowledging their skills and expressing his excitement to see 8 talented individuals compete. He explained the tournament format, where opponents would be chosen randomly for one-on-one battles. The matchups were as follows: melee combat magic versus enchantment magic, healing magic versus long-range magic, formation magic versus summoning magic, and lastly, uncategorized special magic versus alchemy magic. He further clarified that these battles were considered practical lessons, and that the tournament would begin in 10 days. Until then, they had the choice to train and improve their abilities, or take time to rest before the matches. The director expressed his excitement to see everyone's matches. As he left, the representatives bowed in respect. This was the only chance Setsuna had to speak with him, so he quickly followed and called out. The director turned and asked if he was the melee combat department's representative. Setsuna confirmed, introducing himself as Setsuna Cromwell and stating that he had a request. He wanted the director to teach him his magic if he won the tournament. At first, the director found it unnecessary, reminding him that his specialty was melee combat. However, Setsuna clarified that he wasn't asking about summoning magic. He was referring to the director's other magic. This caught the director off guard. He questioned how Setsuna knew about it while his mana flared slightly, a clear sign that he was now on guard. But Setsuna couldn't back down. The second magic was absolutely necessary to fight the evil god. He insisted that he could explain later, declaring that he would win the tournament and prove himself. He urged the director to believe in him. After a long stare, the director seemed convinced. He agreed to teach Setsuna his second magic. If he won, however, he warned that the path wouldn't be easy. Setsuna, determined, assured him that he would claim victory and bowed in gratitude before leaving. Later, while eating, Setsuna thought about thanking Leela for bringing him the delicious bread. But he had little time to relax. The tournament was just 10 days away, and he needed to prepare. Suddenly, he sensed danger and managed to block an incoming attack. It was the blonde-haired man again, striking from his blind spot. Dusting off his shoulder, the man smirked, clearly still holding a grudge. Setsuna, irritated, questioned his behavior. The blonde man admitted that he wanted to fight immediately, unable to let go of his humiliation. But Setsuna dismissed him, pointing out that he had only brought it upon himself. After a moment's thought, the blonde man decided it wouldn't be wise if word got out, so he withdrew his golems and declared that he would be fully prepared for their match. Observing him, Setsuna admitted that his opponent had real talent. He had gathered a large amount of material and controlled it skillfully. However, his regret at losing the bread was greater at that moment. The next day, Lano led the class in analyzing a previous battle between Drago and Setsuna. Before starting, he asked if they had understood his earlier feedback. Drago admitted that he had lost control of his mana and emotions, while Setsuna acknowledged that his raw power was lacking. Drago had clearly overpowered him in strength. Hearing this, Lano was pleased. Recognizing their weaknesses was the first step to improvement. From now on, they would grow stronger through their matches. When asked if this fight would serve as training for the interclass match, Lionel explained that Setsuna's first round opponent would be Noel, someone who could skillfully use his golems for both offense and defense. The golems had solid forms and fought in a way that closely resembled melee combat magic. Lano instructed Drago to focus on speed, making it seem like he was moving as fast as multiple golems at once. Setsuna's task was to predict Drago's attacks and counter them. As they got ready for their training match, Drago was determined to show he had improved. Setsuna, however, had been waiting for this rematch. As soon as the fight began, Drago rushed forward. Setsuna dodged, but Drago quickly adjusted and attacked again, revealing that Setsuna's reaction was still too slow. Lano, observing from the side, was impressed with Drago's speed. Drago didn't let up, constantly pressuring Setsuna. However, after some time, Setsuna started recognizing Drago's attack patterns and began dodging more effectively. Lano encouraged him to keep avoiding the strikes while preparing a counterattack. The battle carried on until both fighters were exhausted. Afterward, their instructor handed them drinks, telling Setsuna that soon he would be able to handle multiple golems with ease. Encouraged by these words, Setsuna thanked his teacher. Lano was pleased to see how quickly Setsuna was learning. Finally, the much-anticipated interclass tournament at Eldridge Academy of Magic had arrived. The students were excited, eager to see who would emerge victorious. Some in the crowd started placing bets. One of the bullies from before, who had bet on Setsuna, loudly cheered for him. Just then, the representative of long-range magic entered the arena, looking completely at ease. A spectator explained that the battlefield changed randomly before each fight, and this time, the setting was a desert. This worked in favor of the blonde-haired man, who appeared satisfied with the choice. The audience cheered for him, convinced of his victory. Leah was irritated by the jeers aimed at Setsuna, but the match was about to begin. The announcer gave the signal, and the blonde-haired man stepped forward, holding a small black steel stone in his hand. He explained that this rare mineral was a key component for crafting golems. As he tossed the stone into the sand, a golem formed instantly. He claimed that not even a blade could scratch it. Then, pulling out a bag filled with similar stones, he threw them across the battlefield. One after another, golems emerged, quickly forming an army. Layla was stunned by the sheer number of golems. The blonde-haired man confidently declared that with the endless supply of sand, he could create an infinite number of them, making it impossible for Setsuna to get anywhere near him. The spectators in the stands shouted for Setsuna to give up, believing the match was already over. However, Setsuna remained unimpressed. He calmly stated that he had expected something far more challenging. Annoyed by this response, the blonde-haired man immediately sent his army to attack. As the golems charged forward, a sudden explosion erupted. Thinking the fight was already won, the blonde-haired man assumed Setsuna had been taken down. But as the smoke cleared, Setsuna stood tall, having destroyed one of the golems. With confidence, he declared that he had mastered the power of the black steel stone. The blonde-haired man was stunned. His golems were known for their toughness, yet Setsuna had destroyed one with ease. Still, he brushed it off, claiming it didn't matter since he could just summon more. But before he could act, Setsuna confidently stated that close combat was his specialty. Even against these golems, he wouldn't lose. Without hesitation, he destroyed every golem that had been summoned. Realizing he had no other option, the blonde-haired man tried to summon more golems. However, before he could react, Setsuna rushed forward and landed a solid punch, knocking him to the ground. Because of the swirling sand, the spectators couldn't see what had happened. But when the dust settled, only one person was still standing, Setsuna Cromwell. He had won the first match. Both Setsuna and Layla were pleased with the outcome, while the audience was left in shock. Some spectators assumed that Noel, the blonde-haired man, must have self-destructed. After all, they believed someone from the combat department couldn't possibly win. However, that wasn't the case at all. Setsuna's victory had also caught the attention of a mysterious man with purple hair. The scene then shifted to the second match. Layla invited Setsuna to sit beside her to watch the fight. He thanked her, mentioning that by observing, he might pick up some useful strategies. The battle began, and Carol, the representative of the summoning department, clearly had the upper hand. Using her summons, she launched a barrage of blue crystals at her opponent. Meanwhile, the other contestant, from the Formation Magic department, attempted to close the distance. Though he was at a disadvantage, his movements were impressive. Watching the match, Layla commented on how incredible the different magic styles were. Despite that, she was still determined to become strong in combat magic. Setsuna asked why she had chosen that path. She explained that a combat mage had once saved her and her brother from a bear attack when they were children. That moment had inspired her to grow stronger so she could protect others. Feeling a little embarrassed, she admitted that her reason might sound childish. However, Setsuna disagreed. He believed that since she had chosen this path from the heart, she would definitely become stronger. A bit flustered, she thanked him for his encouragement. Just then, a friend of hers named Leo appeared and called Setsuna over. Leo was the second strongest in the long-range magic department, just after Setsuna. He approached and complimented Setsuna on his match, then teasingly asked if there was something going on between him and Leela. Setsuna didn't understand what he meant, but Leela, blushing, quickly walked away, insisting that Leo was mistaken and that they were just friends. Curious, Setsuna asked why Leo hadn't become the department's representative, since he was strong enough to defeat Akhtar. As he sat down, Leo warned him to be careful of Akhtar's underhanded tactics. He explained that Akhtar had tricked him, causing him to lose his spot as a representative. Hearing this, Setsuna understood the situation clearly. He realized that Akhtar was someone who would do anything to win. As the scene shifted, Akhtar opened a mysterious box and smirked, clearly plotting something sinister. Finally, the second round of the tournament began. Setsuna was set to face Akhtar. The chosen battlefield was scorching hell, an environment that heavily favored Setsuna's opponent. Meanwhile, in a separate location, two men conversed. Akhtar thanked the head of the department for his assistance, to which the man, visibly annoyed, responded that he would make Setsuna regret choosing hand-to-hand combat. In another scene, Setsuna warned Lee not to touch a particular vase, explaining that a single touch would completely drain her mana. Naturally, she asked why such a dangerous object was even there. Setsuna explained that it was yet another trap set for him. Concerned, Leela asked if he was alright. He reassured her, stating that he had managed to avoid the trap, but placed the blame squarely on Akhtar. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. 3 children stood outside, holding a bouquet of flowers. When Leela inquired about it, they explained that someone had instructed them to deliver it. However, when they pointed toward the person who had given them the flowers, the individual had already vanished. Confused, Leela wondered if it was a fan of Setsuna. But before they could dwell on the thought, the blonde-haired girl suddenly began to feel unwell. Setsuna's eyes widened as he noticed a strange mark appearing on her skin. Without hesitation, he kicked the bouquet away. "It's poison," he stated grimly. "This plant. It's Nim." The other children, too, began to feel sick. Setsuna hadn't expected Akhtar to stoop this low. If they didn't find a healer soon, the condition could become irreversible. Leela asked if the situation was urgent, to which Setsuna firmly confirmed. He advised her to step back, warning that she could still be infected just by being near them. However, she refused, insisting she would stay. Holding up a badge, she revealed it to be a magical tool that stored mana. Then, drawing upon the healing magic her mother had once taught her, she began treating the poisoned children. Slowly, the marks on their bodies faded. Though she admitted she could only use such magic in emergencies, this situation certainly qualified as one. Grateful, Setsuna thanked her, but he had no time to rest. He grabbed the poisoned bukid and ran. He needed to dispose of it quickly, but if he did so in a crowded place, the toxins could spread. Before long, the poison began to take its toll on him. His body weakened, yet he pushed forward until he reached the sacred tree. With the last of his strength, he threw the bukid into the air and slashed it into countless pieces. Exhausted, he collapsed. Meanwhile, at the tournament, the audience grew restless. People began murmuring about Setsuna's absence. A background character stepped forward and confidently declared that Setsuna had quit the match, making Akhtar the automatic winner. But then, a voice rang out, "Wait." The crowd turned as the voice roared with fury. "I haven't given up." Setsuna, barely standing but burning with determination, glared at Akhtar. Akhtar simply smirked. "Oh, and how exactly do you plan to fight me in that condition?" He chuckled darkly. "I gave you a gift, and it seems you've accepted it." Setsuna questioned why Akhtar had resorted to using poison, and even involved innocent children. Akhtar, with a mocking tone, acted as if he had no idea what Setsuna was talking about. Smirking, he stated that even children could be tools for the elite, which only fueled Setsuna's anger. The announcer then signaled the beginning of the second round. As soon as the fight started, Akhtar unleashed his magic, forcing Setsuna to dodge. The spectators noticed something was off. His mana seemed unstable. Even though the sacred tree's blessing had purified some of the poison, there hadn't been enough time to remove it completely. Akhtar didn't allow him any time to recover, continuously attacking and keeping him on the defensive. Watching this unfold, the head of the department seemed pleased, predicting Setsuna's downfall. Setsuna glanced around and noticed that Leah hadn't returned yet. He hoped the children were safe as he braced for another attack. Akhtar, noticing his distraction, taunted him while the crowd jeered, convinced that someone with only close-range combat skills couldn't possibly win against a long-range magic user. Akhtar unleashed another powerful spell, and though Setsuna raised a mana shield to block it, the barrier shattered on impact, leaving him seriously injured. Akhtar sneered at his condition, enjoying the moment. Despite the pain, Setsuna asked why Akhtar was prolonging the battle instead of finishing it. He expected a flurry of attacks meant to overwhelm him, but instead, Akhtar was simply toying with him. Smugly, Akhtar claimed that his approach was strategic. Taking unnecessary risks wasn't his style. He then began charging up a devastating spell, Storm Cannon, declaring it would be the final blow. Just then, Lee's voice called out, letting Setsuna know the children were safe. She held up her brooch as proof. Seeing this, a smile crossed his face. With his worries eased, he focused entirely on the fight. Slowly, he began healing his injuries, declaring this was his turning point. Akhtar was visibly shocked. As his strength returned, Setsuna explained that his ability wasn't just healing. It was a type of physical enhancement that activated his body's cells, helping him fight while managing the poison. He then turned the tables, calling Akhtar a coward for relying on dirty tactics. Furious, Akhtar snapped back, determined to end the fight. Under pressure from the department head, Akhtar launched his storm cannon at full power. Setsuna had no ground advantage, but he didn't need it. Instead of dodging, he redirected the attack, shocking everyone. Akhtar managed to catch his own spell, scoffing at the idea that he couldn't handle his own magic. But that was exactly what Setsuna had counted on. Using the moment of distraction, he closed the distance and struck Akhtar with his blade. Akhtar fell to the ground, defeated. The match was over, and Setsuna was declared the winner. His friends cheered for his victory, but they soon noticed something unusual. The stone beneath them cracked, causing both to plunge toward the lava below. Setsuna had to think fast, but Akhtar remained unconscious. Acting quickly, he grabbed Akhtar's foot, trying to stop his fall. Just then, a girl used her summoning magic, saving them both. It was Carol, a skilled summoner. She casually remarked that he would have been fine even without her help. Setsuna, grateful, thanked her for stepping in. Carol was a well-known competitor from the summoning department, and Setsuna immediately realized he would have to face her soon. Meanwhile, in the stands, the audience was stunned. Setsuna had won yet again. If he continued at this pace, it would be something unheard of. The chief, clearly frustrated, vowed not to forget what had happened. Leah approached and thanked Setsuna for his efforts. Concerned about the children, he asked about their condition. She reassured him that they were in the infirmary, resting, and would recover soon, hearing that eased his mind. But suddenly, he sensed something strange. His expression changed, making Leah ask if something was wrong. What he felt was an intense, menacing magic, one filled with killing intent. It made him wonder what was truly lurking within this tournament. Elsewhere, Setsuna realized he needed more power to counter the mysterious force he had sensed. He soon met with Lieno, who had been called to see him. Lieno, puzzled, asked why. Setsuna addressed him as Comet Fist Lionel, a name that clearly stirred old memories. Lieno was surprised to hear it and asked how Setsuna knew. Before his regression, Setsuna had heard stories of Lieno, how he had once defeated fierce dragons with a single punch before leaving the army. Now, he wanted to learn that very magic. It had been a long time since anyone had called Lieno by that title, but Setsuna insisted that right now, nothing else mattered. Among all the fighters here, Lieno was the strongest. Lieno, casually smoking his cigarette, questioned why Setsuna was still seeking power. He already seemed strong enough. However, Setsuna disagreed. He wasn't strong enough yet. He refused to lose to anyone, even if his opponent was a god. That response piqued Lieno's interest. Although it wasn't a technique he usually taught, he decided to train Setsuna. Channeling mana into his fist, Lieno demonstrated an overwhelming surge of energy. He explained that the technique consumed too much mana, making it impossible to use repeatedly. However, one strike was all it took. With that, Lieno unleashed his technique, and the sheer force of his devastated everything around them. Setsuna was in awe of the power, but it was clear that this move wasn't ideal for one-on-one combat. Even so, Lieno asked if Setsuna was fine with that. Without hesitation, Setsuna confirmed. This was exactly what he needed. With that, Setsuna's training officially began. Meanwhile, in another scene, Carol sat with someone who congratulated her on reaching the finals. They noted that her opponent would be a hand-to-hand combat specialist and asked how confident she felt. Carol responded that victory or defeat was a matter of luck, but she would still give it her best. She then offered the person another cup of tea. As they left, the mysterious figure revealed a strange card. The moment Carol saw it, she collapsed to the ground. It became clear that this person was plotting something against Setsuna. The next day, Setsuna continued training with Lieno. His teacher was astonished. Setsuna had nearly mastered the technique in less than a week, something that had taken Lieno himself 2 years to perfect. With that, Lieno declared that he had successfully taught him the Comet Fist. However, Setsuna disagreed, calling it the charged shot instead. The next match was about to begin. Carol from the summoning department versus Setsuna from the hand-to-hand combat division. The spectators in the stands debated who would win. A chubby spectator was certain that Carol would take the victory, but a girl voiced her support for Setsuna. Meanwhile, 3 children cheered for him excitedly. The chosen battleground for the fight was the ruins of the gods. To prevent the match from causing destruction outside the arena, a powerful barrier was put in place. Lee, watching from the stands, grew anxious. This battlefield wouldn't be a disadvantage for Setsuna, meaning it would be a fair fight. Setsuna turned his gaze toward the director, expecting him to keep his promise and teach him about his second magic. Just then, Carol called out to him with a playful smile, saying, "Let's get along." With that, the final match began. Wasting no time, Carol summoned her Fenner and unleashed a devastating breath attack. It resembled a raging snowstorm. However, Setsuna reacted quickly, dodging the assault. Carol was surprised by his agility but refused to let him breathe. She immediately launched a barrage of attacks through her summoned beast. In response, Setsuna activated his physical enhancement fold and swiftly dodged each of Fenner's attacks, before countering with a powerful strike. In the stands, Leah cheered, relieved that he managed to land a hit. However, Liano calmly explained that summoned beasts were formed using condensed mana, meaning any injuries they sustained would heal instantly. Carol acknowledged Setsuna's strength but wasn't done yet. She began altering the environment with Fenner's help. The battlefield was soon engulfed in ice, the freezing mana trapped within the barrier. This drastically strengthened Fenner's attacks. Carol smirked and asked, "So, what will you do now?" Setsuna knew he couldn't win a battle of endurance. He needed to end the fight quickly. Charging up the charged shot, he continued dodging every attack. The audience watched with concern. Setsuna was on the defensive again. The children nervously hoped he could turn the tide. However, Liano noticed something remarkable. The charged shot normally required time to charge. Yet, thanks to Setsuna's refined mana control, he was managing to build up energy while still fighting. The match was far from over. That was certainly no easy feat. Carol quickly realized that Setsuna was planning something, and she wasn't about to let it happen. Without hesitation, she summoned a second beast, stunning everyone in the audience with her raw talent. Now, both of her summoned creatures charged at Setsuna together. Fortunately, he reacted just in time, countering both attacks with swift strikes. Setsuna knew that Carol had an ace up her sleeve. After all, she was an extraordinary mage. But what truly surprised her was how easily the protagonist had reflected her attack. He wasted no time preparing for another strike. However, before he could act, a mysterious figure muttered, "It ends here," and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, Carol's body shuddered unnaturally. Setsuna's eyes widened in shock. The mana surrounding her felt eerily familiar. It was the same ominous presence as the evil gods. Carol raised her hand against her will, and countless beasts began to materialize across the battlefield. Some spectators gasped in awe, but others quickly noticed something was wrong. This mana wasn't hers. Carol struggled to resist, her voice trembling as she pleaded for the match to be cancelled. She begged for the barrier to be lifted and asked desperately where the mages were. But the mysterious man had already ensured there would be no intervention. The beasts relentlessly attacked Setsuna. He gritted his teeth, trying to locate the source of the corrupted mana. From the shadows, the mysterious figure chuckled. "Still looking for me?" he taunted. Before Setsuna could react, one of the beasts lunged at him, slamming him hard into the wall. Lee's heart pounded as she watched in horror. Lying on the ground, Setsuna felt a sharp pain in his arm. Blood trickled from the wound, and his breathing grew ragged. The shadowy figure smirked. "You'll never find me. It's only a matter of time now." It was a dire situation. Setsuna didn't have the time to charge up the charged shot. Meanwhile, Carol was reaching her limit. If this continued, she would lose control of her mana. Maybe even her life. Summoning his remaining strength, Setsuna kicked one of the beasts away. In that moment, he realized the truth. Carol was being controlled. Tears welled up in her eyes as she cried out, begging him to flee before the creatures killed him. But Setsuna refused to run. The battle raged on as he frantically dodged attack after attack, looking for any chance to counter. The director merely observed in silence. Liano clenched his fists. He could tell that Setsuna's mana was nearly depleted. If help didn't arrive soon, it would be too late. He desperately searched for the mage responsible for the barrier. "Please," he whispered. "Don't die because of me." Then, without warning, a beast lunged from behind, its claws piercing Setsuna's leg. A stunned silence fell over the battlefield. The injury was severe. He wouldn't be able to use his magic now. The sinister figure grinned and commanded the beasts to finish Setsuna off. With a ferocious roar, they obeyed. One of them clamped its jaws around Setsuna's arm, and pain shot through his body as he let out a scream. Somewhere else, Lunnell stood before his students and asked, "What's the most important thing to remember in battle?" A student answered, "To minimize damage and close the distance between you and your opponent." "That's correct." Lionel nodded. "But there's one more thing. Your fighting spirit. Without it, you can't strike back." Back in the present, Setsuna was battered and bleeding. Yet, through gritted teeth, he managed a weak smile. "I did it," he muttered. Then, despite his injuries, he began gathering mana in his fist. The battle wasn't over yet. The mysterious man was caught off guard, realizing he hadn't noticed that detail himself. Meanwhile, Setsuna remained focused, knowing he had to end the battle in one decisive move since the creatures were out of control. Gathering all his remaining mana, he unleashed a final powerful strike. The impact was immense, destroying everything in its path. As the dust settled, Carol collapsed, but Setsuna caught her just in time before she hit the ground. He felt relieved to see that she was safe. The audience, still in shock, watched as the announcer officially declared Setsuna Cromwell the winner. It had been 100 years since someone from the hand-to-hand combat department had won the tournament. The crowd erupted into cheers, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Layla, overwhelmed with emotion, was close to tears, relieved that Setsuna was unharmed. Elsewhere, someone quietly celebrated a successful bet they had placed on the match. The mysterious man, observing everything, was surprised that Setsuna had survived despite the overwhelming odds. Deciding that the mage was no longer of use, he prepared to act. However, before he could do anything, someone had already located him. Without hesitation, they removed the symbol from the mage's neck, breaking its control. Lono rushed to the scene but found the mage unconscious on the ground. With the barrier lifted, the academy staff finally regained control. The director approached Setsuna, explaining that Carol had been manipulated through some magical device. He assured Setsuna that the academy would handle the matter from there. Acknowledging the boy's strength, the director kept his promise and instructed Setsuna to meet him in his chamber the next day. Later, in the medical wing, Setsuna's wounds were being treated. The nurse informed him that his external injuries had healed, but his internal damage would take time to recover. She advised him to rest. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a group of people entered. Setsuna reassured them that he was already feeling better. Leela, overjoyed, congratulated him on his victory. A senior from the hand-to-hand combat department praised him, calling him their pride. The children, who had been cheering for him, excitedly told him how amazing he had been. After spending some time together, they eventually said their goodbyes. Lino then explained the situation. The formation mage had survived, though he had been under someone's control. Both he and Carol needed rest, and the mage would be investigated once he regained consciousness. More importantly, it seemed like Setsuna himself had been the real target during the incident. Lunel asked if he had any idea why that might be. Elsewhere, someone entered a hidden chamber and easily broke through a barrier. Their goal was clear. They intended to eliminate Carol first, then go after Setsuna. They needed to erase all traces of what had happened. However, before they could strike, Setsuna appeared, blocking the attack just in time. He had anticipated they would come after Carol, but he wasn't expecting to find a familiar face. His friend Leo. Leo chuckled, admitting that he had been caught. But he was curious how Setsuna had figured it out, since he had erased all traces of his involvement. Setsuna explained that there hadn't been any signs at first, but after observing Leo's actions, he became certain. They stared at each other for a moment before Leo suggested they talk outside. Once outside, Leo seemed to have something on his mind. He asked Setsuna how long he had known the truth. Setsuna explained that it was because Leo had supported Actor. Despite Actar's underhanded tactics, there was no way he should have lost so easily. Leo was caught off guard. He hadn't expected Setsuna to figure things out so completely. With that, Setsuna was sure of his suspicions. When the match ended, Leo's mana had been infused in the attack. Approaching him, Leo asked whom Setsuna was referring to. He wondered if Setsuna knew about a certain great person. That question startled Setsuna, and he immediately sensed a change in Leo's mana. At that moment, he realized Leo had become a follower of the evil god and had to be stopped. Leo, however, seemed unfazed and said that while he was enjoying this, he had more important things to do. With that, he bid farewell. But Setsuna wasn't going to let him go so easily. Summoning his blade, he charged at Leo. However, when his blade made contact, it simply vanished. Seeing this, Setsuna realized that this situation was the same as when he had fought the evil god. Leo explained that he had been granted an ability to nullify mana, thanks to that person. Because of this, Setsuna's attacks were useless. Despite that, Setsuna didn't give up. He attempted another attack, this time aiming at Leo's blind spot, since his ability only activated when an attack made contact. But even then, his blade disappeared upon impact. It was no use. Leo's mana detection was far more advanced than his. Leo then used flame magic to throw Setsuna back, apologizing for attacking him before he had fully recovered. He acknowledged Setsuna's talent, admitting that combat magic rarely reached this level. However, he pointed out that if Setsuna had chosen ranged magic instead, he might have stood a chance. But it was too late for that now. He was going to finish this. Without hesitation, Leo attacked directly at Setsuna's wound, intending to end the fight quickly. Setsuna gasped, demanding to know why Leo was doing this. Leo's response was simple. He was tired of this world and wanted to destroy everything. Hearing that, Setsuna was furious. Was all of this happening over such a ridiculous reason? He thought of everyone who had died in the war. Yelling in frustration, he told Leo to stop this madness. He demanded to know if this was really the same Leo he once knew. But Leo didn't waste any time answering. Instead, he began preparing another spell. Setsuna was still too far away to use his blade, so he had to act fast. He prepared to launch a charged shot, but he quickly realized it wouldn't be enough. Leo's magic was too fast. At that moment, someone appeared, stopping Leo's magic. Looking to the side, they saw that it was the director. Setsuna felt a wave of relief upon seeing him. The director apologized for arriving late, then turned to Leo and asked if he was responsible for the tournament incident. Leo was surprised that the director had figured it out as well, though it was expected from the Academy's best student. Without hesitation, the director's aura flared intensely as he declared his intent to restrain Leo. He unleashed a powerful flame attack, its sheer firepower leaving Setsuna astonished. However, the attack was useless. Leo effortlessly dispersed the magic. He admitted that, under normal circumstances, he would have been in trouble. But thanks to the authority granted by that person, he was untouchable. The director, seeing this firsthand, was surprised that the magic nullification was real. Setsuna, confused, asked how Leo had already known about this ability. Leo explained that the knowledge had been recorded in the Silver Rock family archives. A long time ago, a similar power had awakened, and magic nullification was one of its abilities. As Leo walked toward them, he declared that their magic was useless against him. Even the director, Dawn, and Silvero stood no chance. He then began preparing an attack, and Setsuna noticed it would be composed of 3 elements. The director, now focused, opened his eyes just as Leo launched his spell. He quickly warned Setsuna to dodge, and both of them leaped away just in time, leaving Leo in disbelief. He was certain his attack should have landed. The director smirked and asked if Leo really thought his magic was invincible. Amused, Leo admitted the director possessed an interesting power, but he asked what he thought of this. At that moment, he released a powerful aura infused with the evil god's energy. He declared that he wouldn't leave a trace of the director behind. Realizing this battle wouldn't be easy, the director knew that if they fought at full strength, the academy would be completely destroyed. Exchanging a quick glance with Setsuna, he made his move. He summoned several glowing butterflies, and with his beast companion, he launched an attack on Leo. Leo immediately understood what the director was trying to do. He was deliberately minimizing the damage to the academy. He didn't complain though. After all, that was the director's duty. The battle intensified as the director and his beast attacked in unison. However, Leo's magic was stronger. His counterattack struck the beast directly, causing it to explode. Confident, Leo smirked and asked if the director was ready to surrender, but it was all just a distraction. In the midst of the chaos, Setsuna suddenly emerged. Leo was surprised. He hadn't expected Setsuna to use the dragon as cover. However, even this wouldn't be enough to defeat him. Setsuna, undeterred, told Leo he was relying too much on that power. Then he charged forward, determined to prove that choosing combat magic was the right decision. He would prove it with this attack. Leo warned him not to underestimate the power of that person. Ignoring the warning, Setsuna advanced toward Leo's barrier. With a powerful strike, he shattered it, causing a massive shockwave. The sheer force of the impact destroyed everything around them, leaving devastation in its wake. The director acknowledged that even magic nullification had its limits and praised Setsuna for his efforts. Seeing Leo on the ground confirmed his theory. If a direct attack was fast enough, it could break through Leo's authority. His decision to use this strategy had been the right one. With the immediate danger taken care of, the director noted that Setsuna's technique was remarkable, but insisted his injuries needed attention. However, before they could react, Leo stood up again despite taking a direct hit. A new aura surrounded him, signaling that the fight was far from over. With a serious expression, he unleashed another spell, forcing Setsuna to summon his mana blade to block it. But as soon as the blade made contact, it shattered instantly, sending him crashing into the wall. The director called out to him, but he was barely conscious, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He wondered if Leo had somehow combined long-range magic with nullification. At that moment, memories of past training surfaced in his mind. He recalled practicing with Leo, who had warned him about an attack aimed at his head. Back then, Setsuna hadn't fully understood what that meant. A voice echoed in his mind, reminding him of his shortcomings, the moments when he had failed to protect those who depended on him. Suddenly, Setsuna woke up in a bed. Leela, who had been by his side, was startled but relieved to see him regain consciousness. She immediately expressed her concern, explaining that he had been unconscious for 3 days. Hearing this frustrated him. He had been defeated twice by the power of the evil god, but an idea quickly formed in his mind, and he urgently asked about the director's whereabouts. Leela told him he was in his chamber and asked what he was planning. His answer only made her more worried, but before she could stop him, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, apologized for making her worry, and left the infirmary. Meanwhile, in the chamber, the director was addressing others when Setsuna suddenly entered, determined to speak with him. His sudden arrival caught everyone's attention, and the director was pleased to see him awake. Lano, observing the situation, pointed out how badly he had lost. However, Setsuna set that aside for now, knowing that Leela and Drago were waiting for him. Acknowledging his failure, he apologized to the director for letting him down and requested an explanation of what had happened after he lost consciousness. But before he could listen, a sharp pain shot through his body, reminding him of his injuries. The director reassured him, saying he still needed time to recover. He then explained that after Setsuna had been defeated, Leo hadn't finished him off because he had exhausted too much of his mana. Despite that, Leo had clearly enjoyed the fight. Before leaving, he created a rift in space, calmly bidding farewell to the director and promising they would meet again in the future. The director didn't want Leo to escape, but the portal he had created led to something entirely unknown. He needed to be prepared before making a move. Setsuna understood the situation. Those mysterious eyes beyond the portal belonged to an unknown entity. Perhaps he knew something about it. The director quickly turned to Setsuna, asking if he had any information. He insisted that Setsuna share everything he knew immediately. In response, Setsuna removed his glove and revealed something, explaining that he had quite a bit of knowledge about that magic. After seeing this, the director asked if Setsuna trusted him. At that moment, Setsuna hesitated. Should he tell the director about the future? Time travel was not something people would easily believe. Noticing his hesitation, the director questioned if there was a reason he was holding back. That's when Setsuna had an idea. He told the director to look at his necklace. When the director examined it, he noticed that the blessing of time had vanished. This meant it had already been used in another timeline. Setsuna confirmed this, explaining that he had activated 10 years in the future to try and change his regrets. After thinking for a while, the director began to understand. A future where he would die and the evil god would rise into the world. Accepting such a fate was difficult. But for Setsuna to use the blessing of time to go back 10 years, he must have carried an unimaginable weight. Standing up, the director acknowledged how much Setsuna had endured alone. But from now on, he would support him. He would become part of his strength. This lifted a huge burden from Setsuna's heart, and he sincerely thanked the director. With his help, he now had a real chance to stand against the evil god and possibly prevent that terrible future. Turning to him, the director said he would teach him a second type of magic. One that could counter the evil god. It was a unique power, separate from any known system. This was called spirit magic. With that, he suggested they move to a different location. As they changed scenes, the director remarked that this place brought back memories from his past. He then explained that spirit magic involved fusing with a spirit, using mana as a medium to draw out great power. It was a different kind of magic where endless combinations were possible. Hearing this surprised Setsuna. The director then told him that rather than explaining further, it would be easier to demonstrate. His eyes suddenly glowed, and Setsuna realized he had already used this power during the fight with Leo. Out of nowhere, the director suggested they play rock, paper, scissors. The request confused Setsuna, but he agreed. However, he lost the game. The director told him to play again, and after multiple rounds, Setsuna realized he had lost every single time. The director then revealed the reason. This was one of the abilities of the spirit of time. It allowed him to see a few seconds into the future. He explained that there were many different spirits in the world, and this was just one example of their unique powers. If someone formed a contract with the spirit of wind, they could fly. With the spirit of water, they could phase through physical attacks. Each contract granted unique abilities beyond imagination. If Setsuna could master this power, he would greatly enhance his combat magic. However, the director explained that spirit magic required forming a contract, but before that, there was an essential preliminary stage. Without delay, he announced that they would begin immediately. As he spoke, an aura began to emanate from his body. He explained that Setsuna needed to become one with nature, to sense the spirits as they moved through the world. Closing his eyes, Setsuna tried to reach out to the spirits, silently asking for their help in defeating the evil god. But no matter how hard he tried, he felt nothing. Shocked, he realized he couldn't sense their presence at all. The director observed this, and explained that Setsuna's failure was due to his deep resentment toward nature. He elaborated that to connect with the spirits, Setsuna had to find inner peace. He needed to think less and feel more. Determined, Setsuna tried again, but he couldn't stop overthinking. The director approached him, advising him not to rush. He reminded Setsuna that it had taken him 3 years to master this ability. Still, he reassured him that he would learn it before the evil god appeared. However, for Setsuna, 3 years felt far too long. He wanted to master spirit magic as soon as possible. After all, they had no way of knowing when the enemy's subordinates would attack. The director didn't fully understand his urgency, so Setsuna explained. The subordinates came from the same world as the evil god, each possessing unique, powerful abilities. Leo was one of them. Before his regression, Setsuna had fought one of these beings. Despite having an advantage with long-range magic, his opponent was overwhelmingly strong. Hearing this, the director asked if this enemy was one of the 12 powers. Setsuna confirmed it, but added that there were others like Leo, hiding in the world. Understanding Setsuna's concerns, the director still urged him not to rush. Pushing himself too hard could lead to disaster. However, he hinted that during dungeon training, Setsuna might make an important discovery. Setsuna didn't understand what he meant, but the director explained that Lano would provide further details. He assured him that he would eventually find a way to surpass his limits. But the journey would be grueling, so he advised Setsuna to rest and recover properly. Meanwhile, in a separate location, a group of monstrous figures gathered. One of them smirked, saying a surprise was coming. As the door creaked open, Leo walked in. "You're late," one of the apostles said. Another apostle glared at him. "You kept us waiting too long, Leo. Do you want to die?" A third apostle scoffed. "Not only did you fail to kill a mere student, but you acted alone and still got injured, and then you ran away. How do you plan to take responsibility for that?" Leo looked up and sighed. "Sorry, boss. Guess I couldn't look cool in front of my best friend." Zan, their leader, narrowed his eyes. "Wipe that smirk off your face. It's irritating." For a moment, the two locked eyes, tension thick in the air. Then, without warning, Zan lunged at Leo. One of the apostles spoke up, telling everyone to stop arguing. They were apostles and should act accordingly. Anakia, the one who spoke, asked if they understood his words, his presence alone sending out a strong, intimidating aura. Despite that, he suggested they start with the reports first. However, Zan shifted the conversation back to Leo, questioning how they should handle him. If Leo stood in his way, Zan declared he would deal with him personally. Puker, on the other hand, asked to handle the assassination instead, saying it would be more entertaining for him. But Sadanaka dismissed both suggestions, stating it wasn't necessary. He had already made a deal with someone he was confident would get the job done. A few days later, Leela approached Setsuna, concern clear on her face. She asked if he was feeling better, and he reassured her that he was. But she wasn't convinced. She had noticed that he seemed more injured after the final match, which meant something must have happened afterward. The director had already explained to Setsuna that they couldn't openly talk about the existence of the evil god. For now, only a few trusted professors knew about it. The investigation into Leo, as well as the Academy's security, would be handled by them. As for spirit magic training, it was going to be postponed for the time being. Back in the present, Setsuna apologized to Lila, assuring her that everything was fine. However, deep down, he knew he needed to recover quickly and grow stronger. With that, their class finally began. Leo stood before them, announcing that they would be starting joint training sessions with other colleges. This training was designed to expose them to different fighting styles, but more importantly, it would push them past their limits. Setsuna quickly realized that teamwork was the main focus of this exercise. Leo then revealed that the training would take place in a one-star dungeon located underground. Since the environment would be dangerous, they would have support from third-party instructors. The training itself would begin in 2 weeks. Hearing this, Setsuna clenched his fists, determined to recover from his injuries before then. Later that day, Layla suggested they eat together, mentioning that they should recover properly and regain their strength before training began. Setsuna agreed, seeing it as a good opportunity to prepare himself. As they walked, they noticed that people around them were starting to recognize Setsuna. After all, he had won the tournament using only hand-to-hand combat magic. Many students whispered about him, pointing in his direction. Leela commented on how strange it was. Just a few days ago, these same people had mocked him, but now they were talking about him with admiration. Then, 3 students approached them. The one in front called out to Setsuna, introducing himself as Carl from the Nobles' Hall. Without hesitation, Carl invited Setsuna to join. Normally, only high-ranking nobles were allowed in, but he was willing to make an exception for Setsuna. If he joined, Carl claimed that nothing would stand in his way. He even insisted that his victory in the tournament made it necessary. However, Carl's expression turned cold as he glanced at Leela. He told Setsuna that staying around her would only ruin his future. Calling her useless, he urged him not to waste his time on her. However, Setsuna refused, surprising everyone. He calmly stated that the only ones wasting time were them. Feeling humiliated, Carl's expression darkened. He suddenly drew his blade forge and lunged at Setsuna, ready to attack. But before Setsuna could react, Leela stepped in, stopping Carl's attack. She firmly reminded him that fighting was not allowed at the academy, her sharp glare making it clear she was serious. Carl hesitated for a moment before pulling back. He and his group left, but not before throwing insults their way. After the situation settled, Setsuna and Layla exchanged a small smile. He was certain she would only continue to grow stronger in the future. Just then, someone called out to them. It was Carol. Setsuna greeted her, saying it was good to see her. She smiled and replied that it was all thanks to him. With her hands clasped together, she sincerely expressed her gratitude. Then, she asked if Setsuna would be willing to come to her room. Hearing this, Lila became completely flustered. However, when they arrived at Carol's room, she explained that she wanted to cook a homemade meal for him as a way of showing her thanks. Setsuna thanked her for the kind gesture. Layla, still feeling awkward, quickly offered to help with the cooking, and Carol gladly accepted. Layla had initially assumed something inappropriate, but she realized it wasn't the case at all. Drago, who had also been invited, asked why he was there. Carol simply responded that the more, the merrier. As they prepared the ingredients, Layla noticed something surprising. They all had healing properties. Meanwhile, Setsuna recalled what the director had told him. Carol had no memory of the incident with Leo. Even so, he felt relieved that nothing bad had happened to her. However, there was still a possibility that someone else could be targeted. While he was lost in thought, Drago placed a hand on his shoulder and asked if something was wrong. Seeing how hard Setsuna had been working on his own, he suggested that he take a break. Suddenly, loud noises came from the kitchen. Drago sighed, wondering if they were doing physical training instead of cooking. Moments later, Carl appeared, asking for his help. Drago hesitated but eventually agreed, though he wasn't too happy about wearing an apron. Finally, the meal was ready. Setsuna was surprised to see so much food on the table. He took a seat, preparing to eat. Before he started, he used magic on his stomach to help with digestion. Then, he began eating quickly. Seeing this, Layla asked if he was okay, and he reassured her that he was fine. The soup in particular was incredible, and he praised its flavor, completely enchanted by it. However, when he learned that Drago was the one who had made it, Carol sighed in defeat, feeling slightly left out. As they ate, memories of his past life resurfaced. He silently vowed that he would never lose anything precious to him again. 2 weeks later, during training, Drago commented that Setsuna was in great condition. Setsuna attributed it to the healing effects of the food they had made for him earlier. He casually said it wasn't anything special, but he was smiling. This time, he and Drago were on the same team, and he was confident that he could truly rely on him. Suddenly, someone called out to them. A blonde-haired student introduced himself as Mun from the 3rd year, and the person beside him was Yaha. After their brief introductions, Mun quickly showered Setsuna with compliments and suggested they work together. Turning to Yiza, she quietly remarked that his friendliness seemed like an act to lower their guard. Mun, still smiling, admitted that it would be, at least for now. Just then, the training session was about to begin. The person in charge, Giovanni, stepped forward and explained the details. They would be entering a 1-star dungeon, where their task was to defeat monsters in combat. Their achievements would be recorded using a memory bracelet. Additionally, any rewards collected from monsters would count as bonus points, and the team with the highest score would receive academy medals. More importantly, anyone who earned over 100 points would qualify for the Migas Battalion Kingdom training. Upon hearing this, Setsuna felt a wave of nostalgia. The Migas Battalion was known as the Kingdom's strongest mage unit, and in his past life, they had been his companions. If he joined the training, he might have the chance to meet them again. Giovanni continued, warning them that deeper dungeon floors were off limits, as they could encounter monsters beyond their capabilities. In case of an emergency, they could use the bracelet to teleport to safety. Looking at his team, Setsuna boldly declared his goal to reach 100 points. But then, reconsidering, he changed it to 200. Drago grinned and echoed the same challenge. Amused, he said he was looking forward to seeing Setsuna achieve it. Giovanni asked if everyone was ready. With that, Setsuna and Drago began concentrating their magic, their sheer energy astonishing everyone around them. At that moment, the training officially began. The two of them rushed ahead at full speed. The Star Dungeon was a vast ruin left behind by an ancient civilization. The monsters within saw intruders as threats and would attack on sight. Despite teleportation magic being available, it was still an incredibly dangerous place. As they advanced, Drago pointed out an open path. Following it, they were stunned by what they found. A massive underground chamber stretching beyond what they had expected. Setsuna took in the sight of ancient vegetation growing throughout the ruins, leading him to wonder if a civilization had truly existed here long ago. He recalled the director's words. This training would be crucial for future missions. Clenching his fists, he reaffirmed his goals, mastering spirit magic and earning training points. He would stop at nothing to achieve them. The rest of the group finally caught up. Yoa pointed out the multiple paths ahead, while another team debated whether they were heading in the right direction. Mun scoffed, calling them fools. He explained that the fundamental principle of dungeon exploration was to go deeper, so the path forward was obvious. Hearing this, Setsuna had an idea. He walked up to a section of the wall and confidently declared that it was fake. Everyone was shocked. Because of the way the vegetation had grown, he suspected there was a large hidden chamber behind it. Mun frowned and asked if that wasn't just a coincidence. Setsuna explained that he could hear the wind coming from the other side of the wall. Before he could say more, Drago struck the wall with a powerful punch, breaking it down and proving Setsuna's theory right. Without hesitation, they rushed forward. Behind them, Mun saw an opportunity to gain extra points. As they moved through the corridor, a massive boulder suddenly fell toward them. Drago stepped forward, telling the others to leave it to him. With a swift strike of his blade, he sliced through the rock with ease. Setsuna acknowledged Drago's strength, admitting that recognizing combat magic was important. However, despite this, he didn't want to fall behind. Just then, a volley of arrows shot toward him, but he dodged them effortlessly. He advanced, cutting them down midair. Watching this, Drago realized the gap in their skill levels. Drago suggested they clear the traps to make it easier for Yiza and Mun to follow. As they continued, they spotted a treasure chest, but before they could reach it, Mun quickly snatched it away. He thanked them, making it clear he had taken advantage of their efforts. Drago seemed disappointed, realizing he had lost in terms of speed. They pressed on looking for more points, but every time they attempted to claim them, Mun would steal them first. Before long, Mun mocked them, confidently stating they would never surpass him. Though frustrated, there was nothing they could do at the moment. Setsuna observed them closely, questioning if stealing others' points was truly their strategy. Yaha seemed unimpressed and turned to Mun, asking if that was really how he planned to win. Mun, unfazed, explained that he wasn't someone who relied only on strength. In his mind, people existed for their own gain, and if others were unhappy with his methods, they should do the same. Setsuna quickly realized Mun was more cunning than he had initially thought. He might even have the ability to teleport, given their different types of formation magic, but there was still something unclear about their strategy. Meanwhile, Yuzua didn't seem concerned about points, even though they had fought multiple monsters. This made Setsuna suspicious. She might have some hidden reason for her actions. As they walked, Mun mentioned that they were close to the end. However, something about the next room felt unusual to Setsuna. Before he could warn them, Mun rushed to open another chest. The moment he did, a powerful energy surged from within. Sensing the danger, Setsuna quickly urged him to stop. But it was too late. Dark energy emerged from the chest, filling the space with a heavy, suffocating presence. This kind of power had no place in a one-star dungeon. Then, the creature revealed itself. Setsuna immediately recognized it. It was the King of Death, a monster far beyond what they were prepared to face. As it looked at them, its voice echoed through the room, declaring that those who disturbed its rest would pay with their lives. The sight of a talking monster stunned Drago. Realizing the danger, Setsuna shouted for Drago to grab Mun and escape. However, Drago, instead of retreating, wondered aloud how many points such a monster would be worth. Before anyone could react, the creature cast a powerful spell, sending a wave of energy toward them. But just as the attack reached them, Setsuna managed to disperse the magic, standing firm against the overwhelming force. Drago attempted to attack the monster, but an unknown magic repelled him, sending him flying. The monster then unleashed multiple spells, shocking the group. Setsuna quickly realized that this creature wasn't just powerful, it had intelligence and magic on the level of a 4-star entity. He managed to shield himself from the incoming attacks, but one spell was dangerously close to Mun. At the last moment, Drago blocked it, then turned to Mun, asking for his help. Another spell targeted someone else, but Setsuna stepped in to protect them. After making sure they were unharmed, he turned to Drago, asking if they should proceed with their plan. However, even in the middle of battle, Mun still intended to steal their points and leave. Drago, sensing something, glanced back at Mun and questioned his intentions. But Mun, playing innocent, claimed he wouldn't betray those who had just saved him. As they prepared for the next move, Setsuna remembered an earlier moment with Leono. Back then, they had asked him if there was a way to become stronger. While there was no direct method, Leono had shown them a special bracelet fused with magical weight. Wearing it would gradually enhance their strength. However, he had warned Setsuna not to use it carelessly and urged them to be cautious. Back in the present, they removed the bracelet. The moment it hit the ground, the floor cracked under its weight. Mun was stunned that they had been using something so intense. But before they could react further, the monster launched another wave of magic. Without hesitation, they activated their physical enhancements and charged forward. Drago landed a powerful kick to the monster's head, but in response, the creature grabbed his leg. Before it could attack again, Setsuna appeared, delivering a strike that sent the monster flying and destroying it completely. With that, they earned 50 points. Mun had never witnessed such strong fighters before. Before he could process it, Setsuna turned to Yaha, asking her to show her injuries. But she had disappeared. Suddenly, the room began to collapse, and more monsters surged toward them. The horde attacked relentlessly, but no matter how many they defeated, their points didn't increase. Noticing this, Drago commented that it seemed endless, and Mun pointed out how unnatural this was for a 1-star dungeon. Watching the scene, Setsuna focused on the energy around them. He sensed the dark magic reviving the creatures, and realized the source was coming from the lower floors. Turning to the others, he asked if they could feel it too. Mun, doubtful, questioned if it was a mistake, but Setsuna recognized the magic. There was a chance it belonged to Yiza. Before they could decide what to do next, Drago rushed ahead, insisting they should descend first. Seeing no other option, Setsuna agreed, adding that if Mun stayed behind alone, he would likely get himself killed. In the end, Mayan couldn't do anything except steal Drago's points. With no other choice, Setsuna followed Drago down, and Mian reluctantly decided to go with them. Even in this situation, Mayan noticed how skilled they were and asked if they had trained before. But before answering, Setsuna pointed to a spot, sensing strong magic coming from that direction. As they approached, they discovered the true source of the dark energy. It was a one-eyed monster, something Setsuna had never seen before. Typically, such energy came from a magic circle, not a creature. Mian scoffed, saying they didn't know how to properly explore a dungeon. But before he could say more, Drago stretched a little and struck him, payback for all the trouble he had caused. Despite destroying the main source of magic, the undead creatures continued reviving. They wondered why, but Mian was too focused on getting his 100 points and leaving as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Setsuna turned to him and asked if he had noticed anything about Yiza. Mian claimed he had no idea, suggesting she had probably run away in fear. However, Setsuna recalled that she hadn't seemed scared at all, even when the monster attacked. There was something strange about her and the unnatural monsters in this dungeon, especially with the presence of dark magic. Thinking about it further, he suspected that one of the apostles might be involved. If that was true, it would be dangerous for Drago and the others. He silently hoped that Leela and everyone else were safe. Just then, another wave of monsters charged at them, but Drago only cared about gaining more points. They fought relentlessly, clearing out every enemy that came their way. After the battle, Setsuna finally reached his goal of 200 points, and Drago did as well. Mian, still shaken, announced he would be leaving. Drago asked if he wasn't going to look for Yuzuha, but Mian dismissed the idea, saying they had only met the day before and he didn't care about her. However, just as Setsuna was about to search for her, Mian realized something. They couldn't return to the surface. Panic set in as he insisted that couldn't be true. Drago wondered if there was a problem with the bracelet, but Setsuna once again sensed a dark, sinister power coming from below. Determined, he declared he would find Yaha himself. Drago immediately volunteered to go with him, saying she had done a lot for them. Setsuna didn't refuse but warned him not to rush, as he still sensed strong magic nearby. Meanwhile, Mine argued that they should leave and report everything to Professor Giovanni. He questioned why they were even going after Yaha. Setsuna simply told him to handle the report and be careful on his way back. Mian hesitated, wondering why he was even considering staying. Despite everything, he knew it was still too dangerous for him to leave alone. Drago placed a hand on Mian's shoulder and assured him they would find Yiza and leave together. With no other choice, Mian agreed to help look for her as well. As they walked, he asked Setsuna how he was able to sense Yaha's mana. Setsuna explained that it came from practice, though the answer wasn't very satisfying to Mian. Just then, Drago noticed the air around them growing colder. A strange sound echoed through the corridor, and Setsuna pointed ahead, saying the noise was coming from that direction. Drago stepped forward, calling out to see if anyone was there. That's when they spotted Yaha. Rushing to her side, they immediately asked if she was alright. But something was wrong. Her hand and face were possessed by some unknown force. Trembling, Yaha pleaded for them to save her. Drago moved to help, but Setsuna quickly stopped him, recognizing it as an ancient trap. Since there were no visible markings, it had to be infused with dark magic, the same kind of magic his friend had encountered in his past life. He explained that the trap could only be dispelled with a specific type of magic and told the others to leave it to him. Focusing his energy, Setsuna cast a spell directly at the magic circle. The moment the trap was broken, Yuzawa collapsed onto him, and as he caught her, he noticed a faint magical glow near her ear. Mian, still skeptical, asked what would happen to Yiza, blaming her for being reckless. Setsuna didn't know the answer, but he was certain this incident was caused by one of the apostles. He told them to report everything to the professors. Then, he asked Mian if his bracelet could still transport them back. Mian tried, but as expected, it didn't work. Yaha's didn't either. Before they could come up with another plan, the entire place began to tremble. Drago shouted for everyone to run. Mian, confused, hesitated, but the others urged him to move. However, Setsuna soon realized they were trapped. Their path was blocked by rubble. He suggested searching for another safe road. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, Lee called out, hoping someone was there. A weak voice responded, pleading for help. She and her companions hurried over, finding someone trapped under the debris. Quickly, they pulled him free and used healing magic. When they asked about the others, he pointed toward the collapsed passage, saying someone was still behind it. Praying for Setsuna and the others' safety, Layla focused on finding a way to help. Back at the blocked path, Drago suggested that Setsuna use his charged shot to clear the rubble, but Setsuna hesitated. The risk was too great. It could cause another collapse. Drago, however, insisted that they could handle it as long as they removed the debris carefully. But the situation was worsening. The air was getting harder to breathe, and they were already exhausted. Setsuna knew they needed another way out. He suggested going deeper into the dungeon, but considering everyone's condition, he offered to go alone. Mian, still doubting him, asked why he was so confident. Even if Setsuna was strong, there were still powerful monsters ahead. Instead of letting him go alone, Mian suggested another plan. The protagonist explained that the dungeon boss had awakened, which caused them multiple earthquakes. Because of that, there was no way for them to return. Drago was impressed by Setsuna's knowledge, but all of it came from his past dungeon explorations. Determined, Setsuna prepared to move forward. Drago suggested marking his path as a precaution. Setsuna reassured them that he would save everyone, and then left. As he advanced, he thought about the effect the boss had on the dungeon. If he had elemental or purification magic, things would be much easier. One major weakness of combat magic was its lack of elemental attributes, as most hand-to-hand attacks were purely physical. Even so, he felt something burning deep inside him, urging him forward. Meanwhile, Drago kept trying to clear the rubble. Myun admitted that he had once thought Setsuna won the tournament by luck, but now he realized he was wrong. While Myun had been cheating, Setsuna and the others had actually been getting stronger. He couldn't help but wonder who was the real fool. Suddenly, they heard a voice calling out. Drago quickly responded, and soon, Leah recognized him. She asked if he was alright, and if there was any news about Setsuna. Drago explained that everyone was safe, and that Setsuna had gone ahead to search for another way out. In another part of the dungeon, Setsuna descended a flight of stairs, and soon spotted the exit. But it was blocked by a barrier. Dark energy filled the area, making it clear that he couldn't afford to lower his guard. Without warning, something lunged at him. He narrowly dodged and turned to see a monster with two heads. Hydra. Was this the source of the dungeon's chaos? Its body looked corrupted, as if resurrected by someone. The only ones capable of such magic were those with the power of the evil god. Before he could think further, the Hydra released a wave of poison. Setsuna swiftly avoided it. He knew that if he didn't defeat this monster, the dungeon situation would only get worse. There was no time to waste. Charging forward, he struck the Hydra repeatedly. The battle was fierce. In his past life, he had fought a Hydra before, so he knew a crucial fact. It wouldn't die unless its heads were destroyed completely. He had to cut them off one by one. However, his previous attacks had done little damage. The Hydra's skull was too thick. He needed to target its weak points. Focusing his strikes, he managed to sever one of its heads. But before he could react, the remaining head lunged at him. He barely dodged in time, though the attack still grazed him. If he had taken a direct hit, it would have been fatal. Then, to his shock, the severed head regenerated instantly. Realizing his mistake, he now understood. He had to cut both heads at the same time. Taking a deep breath, he decided it was time to test the new technique he had learned. In another scene, Setsuna attempted to conjure 2 mana blades but failed. Lano found his effort impressive, but explained that his body couldn't sustain the image in his mind. He advised Setsuna to first focus on controlling his mana internally. Unlike other types of magic, this one required a much greater degree of internal control. As he recovered, Setsuna continued training his mana control to improve it further. However, he hadn't tested it since that day. To avoid overexerting himself, he decided to start by forming a single blade before attempting the second. Preparing himself, Setsuna launched another attack on the Hydra, but it wasn't strong enough. In response, the Hydra threw him against the wall. Using the wall as support, he pushed off for another attempt. He realized he was consuming more mana than usual and suspected it was due to the poison's effect. His body was reaching its limit, but he refused to die there. With only one chance left, he steadied his breathing and focused. As the Hydra lunged at him, he dodged and, at last, successfully conjured 2 mana blades. He struck in a flurry of precise cuts, slicing the Hydra into multiple pieces. Since he had severed all its heads simultaneously, it wouldn't regenerate this time. Looking at his hands, Setsuna noted that his technique was still unstable. He needed more training to perfect it. Just then, a voice congratulated him on defeating the Hydra. Setsuna turned to see Giovanni approaching. Realizing the monster had been his creation, Setsuna wasn't surprised. Giovanni, on the other hand, seemed mildly impressed but expected nothing less from him. Setsuna remained cautious and asked 2 questions. First, if Giovanni was an apostle, and second, why he had gone to such lengths. Giovanni smirked and explained that turning a dead body into a puppet was a fascinating concept, one inspired by Setsuna's own combat performance. He then revealed that Yaha had unknowingly played a part in his plan. She had sought to become his ally, so he had guided her, though though he never had any real expectations for her. Even after receiving the enchanted earring, Yaha hadn't suspected anything. To Giovanni, she was nothing more than a fool, but at least she should feel honored to become an undead. Hearing this, Setsuna's patience snapped. He declared that Giovanni had gone too far and would pay for his sins. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, the others were still clearing debris. Finally, Drago uncovered Leela. She thanked everyone for their help, admitting she hadn't expected to get trapped like that. However, they soon noticed that the tremors had stopped, and the eerie red glow was fading. That could only mean one thing. Setsuna had done something. Lila told everyone to move farther away and teleport to a safe place. Drago then told them to be careful, and decided to go after Setsuna as a precaution. She agreed and said she would wait outside. With that, Drago went in search of Setsuna. Meanwhile, in the previous moment, Giovanni taunted Setsuna, daring him to try and stop him. Without hesitation, Setsuna moved to attack, but Giovanni turned into ice and struck back. Watching this, Giovanni smugly asked how Setsuna planned to defeat him. It became clear that his traps and counterattacks were combined, making it even harder to fight him. Setsuna needed to end this quickly, but his mana was already drained from the previous battle. As he rushed toward Giovanni, he noticed that before activating his magic, Giovanni had to teleport to a specific spot. With that in mind, Setsuna tried to strike again, but once more, he was countered. The poison in his body was making him weaker, and he collapsed to the ground. Giovanni mocked him, but Setsuna refused to give up. He was determined to break Yaha's curse, no matter what. Giovanni coldly stated that making her undead had been a reward for luring Setsuna in. If Setsuna wanted to break the curse, there was only one way. He had to swear loyalty to Giovanni, but Setsuna had no intention of following someone like him. He tried attacking again, but it was useless. However, he had started to understand how Giovanni's teleportation worked. Giovanni was surprised at how quickly Setsuna was figuring out his magic. That only made him even more eager to turn Setsuna into part of his undead collection. At that moment, Setsuna realized something. Giovanni himself was also undead. Giovanni proudly revealed that he had been granted immortality by a certain person, calling himself their greatest creation. Setsuna asked if he meant the evil god. Giovanni simply replied that he only wanted to spread happiness by giving immortality to those who were worthy. Then, he once again urged Setsuna to surrender. Setsuna's consciousness was slipping, but he knew he had to find a way out. Just then, he sensed a familiar presence and smiled, knowing help was coming. Giovanni had already begun his ritual when suddenly, a stone struck him. Drago had arrived. Without wasting time, Setsuna rushed forward and punched Giovanni, though the enemy quickly turned to ice again. Drago asked if Setsuna was okay. He assured him that he could still fight and asked about the others. Drago explained that everyone had already escaped the dungeon, and Leela had helped them. Hearing this, Setsuna felt relieved, realizing Leela was becoming more dependable. Giovanni, however, was furious that his ritual had been interrupted. He angrily muttered that Drago was always a nuisance. Drago was taken aback, but Setsuna remained focused. He knew they had to stop Giovanni. Someone like him didn't belong in their academy. Setsuna explained that Giovanni could counterattack at any moment, so they had to dodge quickly. Whenever Giovanni attacked, he would teleport to another location. The plan was to keep forcing him to move until they could finally defeat him. His regeneration had already started to slow down. With that in mind, they launched their attack. Giovanni found their persistence irritating, but Drago and Setsuna worked together, pressing him from both sides. Eventually, they managed to bring him down. Setsuna's hands were covered in blood and wounds, while Giovanni's body lay destroyed on the ground. But as Setsuna's body reached its limit, he collapsed. However, it wasn't over yet. Giovanni injected something into himself, something given to him by that person, and ordered the Hydra to merge with him. Setsuna's vision blurred as he warned Drago not to lower his guard. Drago stood frozen in shock as Giovanni, now in his Hydra form, raged about being forced to use the power he had been granted. He swore to tear them apart. At that moment, both Setsuna and Drago were in grave danger, but Setsuna was powerless to stop it. Then a small flame flickered in front of him. Confused, he wondered what it was. He suddenly remembered that spirit magic could enhance the body when merged with a spirit. He recalled the director's advice to stop thinking and instead reach a state of emptiness, feeling the magic rather than trying to control it. As he let go of his thoughts, he sensed the presence of a spirit trying to connect with him. He called out to it, asking for its help to protect his friends. But in an instant, everything changed. He was suddenly pulled into another dimension. Looking around, he turned to see a massive, flaming figure behind him. Its mana was overwhelmingly strong, and its towering body radiated intense heat. Just standing near it, he felt a crushing pressure. Despite this, he stepped forward and asked the spirit to listen. He pleaded for its power, explaining that his friends were in danger and he needed its help. The spirit, unimpressed, called him arrogant. A whirlwind of fire swirled around Setsuna, its heat almost unbearable. The spirit then said it had only been willing to hear him out, but it saw no reason to grant him its power. Without hesitation, it trapped him between massive stones and questioned why it should listen to him at all. Then, the heat around him intensified. Flames spread, the air itself becoming blistering hot. The spirit announced that it would raise the temperature until Setsuna was reduced to nothing. The burning sensation overwhelmed him, but he refused to give up. He had to convince the spirit. The spirit was surprised to see him still conscious. Any normal human would have already perished. But then, it sensed something unusual within him. There was a presence, the spirit of time. It hesitated and asked if there was a reason behind it. Instead of stopping, the spirit burned him even more, while Setsuna continued to plead, desperate for it to hear him out. Watching Setsuna endure the flames only made the spirit more irritated. It wasn't just him. It was all the others who had been sent to this place. They were all equally troublesome. Hearing this, Setsuna wondered if the spirit knew anything about the evil god. He then declared that he would defeat it, but the spirit questioned him. What could he possibly do? No matter how hard he tried, this place was endless, and it would burn him to ashes with its flames. But Setsuna remained firm. He didn't care how much he suffered. He would not waver again. Seeing his determination, the spirit gave a small smile and challenged him to prove himself. It unleashed even more flames, scorching his skin. The heat was unbearable, and breathing became difficult. His senses began to fade, but he refused to stop. He thought of Drago in the real world, realizing he could not die here. He had to survive until he defeated the evil god. Once again, he pleaded for the spirit's power, not just to win this battle, but to ensure he would never lose to anyone, not even the evil god. The spirit was taken aback. No one had ever lasted this long in its domain. However, upon closer inspection, Setsuna had already lost consciousness. Despite this, the spirit decided to grant him its power. Before sending him back, it ordered him to deal with those who had annoyed it. Back in the real world, Drago was struggling against Giovanni. He couldn't use his mana against that strange ice. Giovanni questioned him. Was he really going this far just to save a human? It was pointless. Drago's previous injuries had left him too weak to fight back. Giovanni declared that his next attack would be the last, and once Drago was gone, he would kill the person Drago had been protecting all this time. With that, he struck Drago, sending him flying. Drago could only regret that he could no longer use his mana. Seeing Giovanni preparing his final attack, he accepted his fate. In that moment, memories of his parents flashed before him. Their proud faces as they told him to become a shield for his friends and prove the power of combat magic. But now, he could only apologize for failing to protect his friend. As Giovanni released his attack, he suddenly realized that Drago had disappeared. Confused, he turned to the side and was stunned by what he saw. Setsuna had returned, but he was completely different. An intense aura surrounded him, burning like an uncontainable flame. Before Giovanni could react, Setsuna vanished from his sight. In the next instant, he reappeared, delivering a powerful punch straight to Giovanni's stomach, sending him crashing into a wall. Giovanni struggled to understand how he could be using elemental magic. His regeneration had slowed, and the flames surrounding Setsuna were not ordinary. Then, Noticing the symbol on Setsuna's hand, he realized something. There were two different types of magic flowing within him. The sheer pressure coming from Setsuna made him tremble. A strange feeling crept into him. Was this fear? He didn't want to believe it. Clenching his fists, he began preparing another attack. Since Giovanni was undead, he couldn't die. Without hesitation, he launched a poison vortex at Setsuna. However, with just one hand, Setsuna managed to deflect it. This shocked Giovanni. His poison had evaporated instantly, burned away by pure mana. But before he could react, Setsuna struck him with a powerful punch. Yet, something felt off. Setsuna's body started acting strangely. He questioned whether this was really happening. Why couldn't he control the power that had been granted to him? Giovanni noticed the hesitation and seized the opportunity, attacking from behind. Even though Setsuna was barely conscious, his instincts kicked in, and he dodged just in time. Seeing this, Giovanni realized that Setsuna had moved purely on reflex. Wasting no time, Giovanni struck again, this time landing a direct hit and pinning Setsuna down. He acknowledged the strength Setsuna had gained, but in the end, he was still just a human. He declared that he would take Setsuna's head as proof that an undead was superior. Before he could finish his attack, Leela suddenly appeared. She had finally arrived to help. She apologized for the delay and promised that she wouldn't let him be hurt anymore. But Giovanni didn't seem too concerned by her presence. Looking at Setsuna, Leela noticed he was unconscious. His red hair and the flames around him were unlike anything she had seen before. She didn't know what had happened to him, but one thing was clear. She would protect him no matter what. Meanwhile, Setsuna found himself in another dimension once again. The spirit's voice called him pathetic for being consumed by such a weak flame. Setsuna was confused. Hadn't they already merged? Then, he saw Leela and immediately asked how he could control his new power. But the spirit refused to give him an answer, saying he had to figure it out himself. This only made him more anxious. Back in the real world, Leela continued fighting Giovanni, but she was overwhelmed and struck down multiple times. As she lay on the ground, she remembered what Setsuna had once told her, that true strength came after resolving one's heart. Someone had also once advised her not to rush things, assuring her that once she found clarity within herself, she would become stronger. The spirit, watching this unfold, seemed amused. It questioned whether Setsuna would meet his end alongside her. If that was the case, the spirit itself would finish him off. Something inside Setsuna stirred. His consciousness snapped back to the present. Giovanni was stunned to see him awake, but before he could react, Setsuna grabbed him and unleashed his elemental magic, Inferno Blaze. Setsuna explained that humans had limited lifespans, so they had no choice but to give their all. It was precisely because he had faced death so closely that he could understand the magic of fire spirits. With that, he charged at Giovanni. Meanwhile, Leela rushed to Setsuna's side, asking if he was all right. He gave a reassuring smile, saying things would be fine now. He thanked her for protecting him and asked about her injuries, but she assured him she was fine. Drago, still recovering, was surprised to see Leela there. She explained that the seniors had already escaped using teleportation magic, but she had a feeling something was wrong and decided to come back. Leela asked the others to inform the professors about what had happened. She was sure they would arrive soon. Hearing that, Setsuna felt relieved, but his body was completely exhausted, and he soon lost consciousness. Meanwhile, the rest of the group arrived and saw 3 fallen students. Their rescuers felt relieved that everyone was safe. They had already heard the situation from Mun, so they had come to help. However, Setsuna asked them to take care of Leela and Drago first. Watching them leave, he felt at ease. Sometime later, when he opened his eyes, he found himself back in the infirmary. Looking around, he slowly recalled everything that had happened. Even now, he could still feel the lingering warmth from the battle. Just then, the door opened. It was Lono. Setsuna immediately asked about the others, which made Lono smile. He was always worried about them, even while unconscious. Lono reassured him that the others were fine, and that he was the last one to wake up. Lionel had already heard about the battle. He explained that the director had taken charge of resolving the situation, which gave Setsuna some relief. However, there were still many unanswered questions. Although it was late, Lono apologized. He explained that he had heard about the Leo Aleste incident from the director. There were still others with power like his, but their investigation had been delayed due to the recent events. They hadn't been able to foresee Giovanni's intentions, which had once again put students in danger. Lono then firmly stated that he wouldn't let something like this happen again. Setsuna understood and told him to lift his head. However, as he moved, a sharp pain shot through his body. Lionel explained that it was the result of pushing his mana beyond its limits. Since his injuries had already been healed, there was no need to worry. It was just a side effect. All of it was thanks to the person who had treated him. Curious, Setsuna asked who that person was. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Lionel smiled and said that the person was right there. To Setsuna's surprise, the person who entered was Professor Zachary. He wasn't the only one surprised. Everyone else was too. Zachary handed him some sliced apples and told him to eat. Meanwhile, Lono patted Zachary on the back, saying he had something to share. Zachary then did something unexpected. He apologized to Setsuna. He admitted that he had treated him harshly during the orientation test. Seeing someone like Setsuna join the combat magic department had irritated him. In the past, Zachary had been an honor student, but when he chose the path of combat magic, his friends and family abandoned him. So when he saw Setsuna make the same choice, it made him angry. However, despite his initial feelings, he had seen what Setsuna and his team had accomplished. They had scored the highest in training, even breaking a record. That had proven to him that melee combat mages could be capable of great things. In the end, he was glad that Setsuna had shown the value of combat magic, and he sincerely thanked him. Setsuna found Zachary's change in attitude strange. He seemed like a completely different person, compared to their first meeting, and he couldn't help but wonder if his first impression had been wrong. Setsuna smiled, and also apologized for being rude earlier. He then thanked Zachary for saving them. Zachary accepted his thanks and told him that he would see him in class before leaving. After Zachary left, Lionel handed Setsuna something, explaining that the director wanted him to have it. It was a glove, since bandages wouldn't be enough to hide that thing on his hand. No one had ever seen or heard of the strange symbol on his palm before. Hearing this, Setsuna suddenly asked if Lionel knew about spirit magic. Lionel explained that spirit magic was also called ancient magic. Hundreds of years ago, this magic had triggered a great war among mages, and because of that, anything related to it had been strictly forbidden. He warned Setsuna not to use spirit magic in front of others, because if the Holy Church found out about him, it would be over for him. Thinking about it, Setsuna remembered learning about ancient magic in the past, but he never expected that spirit magic was specifically the same thing. This revelation confused him, so he asked Lionel how he knew about it. Lionel revealed that the director had told him everything. The existence of the evil god, the apostles, and spirit magic. He also knew that Setsuna had returned from the future. Only he and the director were aware of this secret. Setsuna was relieved that not many people knew about it, but he still wondered if keeping it hidden was truly the best option. However, Lionel reassured him, saying that none of that mattered to him. To him, Setsuna was just Setsuna Cromwell of the melee combat magic department. Hearing that, Setsuna smiled and thanked him. He then asked where the director was. Lionel explained that the director had found some clues about the apostles, and would be gone for a while. This surprised Setsuna, but before he could ask more, Lionel told him to rest for now. Once he had recovered, he would explain everything. This only made Setsuna more curious and uncertain. During the fight, he realized that without that power, he would have been in a much worse condition. Even though he had managed to control it with Layla's help, he wasn't confident that he could do it again. The power was overwhelming, something beyond his limits. Just then, a voice echoed in his mind, confirming his thoughts. The voice said that a mere human like him wouldn't be able to control such power easily. Setsuna looked to the side. but no one was there. Then the voice spoke again, saying that it was right in front of him. Suddenly, a form appeared, covering his body. It introduced itself as Blazer. Setsuna looked at it and felt that its form didn't suit its name. Blazer then jumped off his bed and walked toward the window. Looking outside, it seemed amazed by the modern world. It found everything huge, but only because it was small. Setsuna asked if there was something special about the view. Blazer replied that there wasn't anything in particular, but since this was its first time in this form, it was still a new and interesting sight. Setsuna asked why Blazer had taken that form. Blazer explained that they were connected by the symbol on his hand, which Setsuna already knew. However, Blazer needed a large amount of mana to maintain his true form. If he fully manifested, a mortal's mana would be drained too quickly, so he had to stay in this smaller form for now. Realizing this was a chance to learn more about spirits, Setsuna asked about the great magical war from hundreds of years ago. He wanted to know if Blazer had played a role in its outcome. But Blazer didn't remember much. He only recalled feeling an intense fury, but he had no interest in his past anymore. Only the present mattered. With that, he suddenly took off running. Setsuna called after him but knew he couldn't let others see a spirit, so he quickly chased after him. Blazer ran through the area, taking in his surroundings and commenting that they were worth exploring. People around them were curious, and some of the girls found the creature cute. As Setsuna struggled to keep up, Blazer teased him for his weak body, wondering if he could even catch him. Despite his exhaustion, Setsuna kept going. A blonde man tried to stop him, but he ignored him. Another person stood in his path, but he brushed past them as well. Eventually, he lost sight of Blazer and stopped to catch his breath. Just then, Mun appeared and asked what was going on. The girls with him whispered among themselves, but their words irritated Mun, who defended Setsuna. Mun then explained that people had started treating him differently after his high score in training. Setsuna hadn't expected someone like Mun to take his side, and found his personality unusual. Mun then mentioned Yua. She wasn't in danger, but she was still imprisoned and being questioned by the teachers. Setsuna's expression darkened at the news, but he stayed focused and asked Mun if he had seen a red creature. Mun confirmed it and pointed him in the right direction. Looking out a nearby window, Setsuna spotted Blazer and thanked Mun before hurrying off. As more people gathered, a purple-haired man stepped forward, eyeing Blazer curiously. He assumed it was a magical beast and, upon noticing Setsuna, became irritated. It seemed Setsuna had caused trouble for him. But when he looked back at Blazer, he smirked, deciding to take action. Claiming he needed to maintain order in the academy, he cast a spell aiming straight at Blazer. However, Blazer effortlessly dispersed it with his flames, shocking the man. Blazer then turned to him and, with a burst of fire, warned him to know his place. Blazer's flames burned the man's clothes, forcing him to flee. Setsuna, relieved that Blazer was unharmed, quickly realized that the students around them could be in danger. In this form, Blazer had access to his powers, which could easily get out of control. The onlookers murmured among themselves, questioning whether what they had just seen was fire. Brushing it off, Blazer asked if they were friends with that fool. Not wanting to escalate the situation, the others suggested it would be best to leave. But before they could, Lila appeared. This worried Setsuna, but before he could react, his leg throbbed in pain again. Lee observed him carefully while Blazer, irritated, asked if she wanted to be burned as well. Setsuna tried to call out to Lila, but his leg held him back. Lila, however, calmly approached Blazer and asked if he was the one who had helped Setsuna in the dungeon. When he confirmed it, she sincerely thanked him for saving her friend's life. Blazer, clearly pleased, seemed to respect her attitude. Watching this, Setsuna was surprised. Lila then offered Blazer one of the apples she had brought for Setsuna. Blazer accepted the gift and took a bite, instantly delighted by its sweet taste. Later, while the group was having lunch, Drago curiously asked about the creature. Setsuna, not wanting to reveal Blazer's true identity, simply said it was a magical beast. Though he needed to stay cautious, Blazer didn't pose any real threat to the students. Setsuna thanked Lee, but she shrugged it off, saying it was nothing. She noted that Blazer only seemed nervous with so many people around. Meanwhile, passing students stared in fascination at the unusual creature. Blazer, aware of the attention, ignored it since it was just meaningless gossip. However, he did notice that it was being treated like a rare animal. Amused, he suddenly told Leela that he could make her his subordinate, though only Setsuna could hear him. Changing the topic, Setsuna turned to Lila and Drago, once again thanking them for saving him in the dungeon. Lila simply said that helping a friend was the right thing to do. Drago then pulled out a letter he had received from his relatives. They expressed their happiness and told him he should be proud of becoming a combat mage. Hearing this, Setsuna was genuinely happy for his friend. Just then, Lila turned to Setsuna with a serious expression and asked about Professor Jivan's true identity. But even Setsuna wasn't sure. They might learn more after interrogating Yuzua. At first, he had suspected Juvan was an apostle, but his only known ability was merging with a Hydra. Even so, his power was immense. Drago then asked another question, this time about the strange power Setsuna had used in the dungeon. He seemed suspicious about the flames. Lee quickly explained that the power had come from the small creature. Meanwhile, she gently stroked Blazer, as if he were a harmless pet. Setsuna tried to explain that he had been in a state of emptiness, making it difficult to describe his experience. Before he could say more, Professor Silas, the long-range magic instructor, called his name. The students nearby whispered, expecting another scolding. Annoyed, Silas dismissed them before turning to Setsuna. His eyes landed on Blazer. He frowned, saying he had never seen such a magical beast before and asked if it was a band. Without waiting for an answer, he informed Setsuna that any magical creature had to be registered at the academy. Calling Blazer a pet irritated the spirit, but Silas continued, warning that if Setsuna didn't take care of it soon, he would handle it himself. Blazer scoffed, questioning whether Silas even understood who he was dealing with. The tension rose, but before it could escalate, someone stepped in unexpectedly. Setsuna was surprised to see this person defending him. Silas smirked, calling it shameful to bow to a student, especially one who once held the highest honor in combat magic. Hearing this, Drago slammed the table in frustration. Silas turned to him, asking what his problem was. Without hesitation, Drago grabbed Zachary and loudly declared that their first place ranking in training was thanks to him. Quickly understanding Drago's plan, Setsuna and Leela joined in, showering Zachary with praise. Overwhelmed, Zachary nearly teared up, but Silas only grew more annoyed. A student in the background muttered that Silas acted superior despite the combat magic department ranking higher. Embarrassed, Silas quickly left, reminding Setsuna to submit the registration documents by morning. Setsuna sighed in relief, uncertain of what might have happened if Blazer had lost control. He thanked Zachary, who acknowledged that Setsuna must have his reasons for bringing a magical beast. Later, after saying goodbye to Leela and the others, Setsuna noticed a phantom beast approaching him with a letter. The message congratulated him on obtaining spirit magic. It was from the director. The letter expressed concern about his ability to control the magic while still recovering. Though the director wished to guide him personally, he had to remain away. Instead, he had arranged for someone else to teach him, someone who would not only help him use his power, but also control it. The director assured him that Lano would make the introduction and wished him luck. Elsewhere, an elderly man sat reading the same letter. He sighed, finding it pathetic that he had to teach someone how to use spirit magic. His expression darkened as he realized the director had revealed this place without his permission. Even though the recommendation came from the director, the old man refused to forgive it. He threw the letter aside and declared that if Setsuna Cromwell turned out to be incompetent, he would eliminate him at the upcoming magical conference. Meanwhile, the director explained that this report was necessary. The man beside him questioned whether this was truly the end of the matter. They still found it hard to believe in the existence of the evil god and his apostles. Without concrete evidence, it all seemed like mere speculation. However, The director argued that their enemies had left no traces, which was exactly why he sought help. The other man dismissed it as nonsense, suggesting that the director might simply be misremembering things. As the meeting concluded, Linnell called out to the director. He immediately acknowledged that the discussion had been difficult, but it was understandable that others wouldn't easily accept such claims. Lannel agreed, recognizing that such matters were not simple to discuss. Still, they couldn't afford to ignore the possibility. If the apostles were truly planning to act, Lannel had a proposal in mind. He then sat down and asked about Setsuna's condition. Lannel smiled, explaining that Setsuna was recovering and doing his best. He found the young man unusual, but he hoped he would regain his strength and track down the person they were searching for. Meanwhile, Carol had been watching over Setsuna. When he suddenly opened his eyes and saw her, he flinched in surprise. Confused, he asked why she was there. Carol explained that she had heard about his condition and wanted to bring him some food to help with his recovery. She had learned the recipe from Drago. Setsuna thanked her for searching for Blazer the previous day. Carol mentioned that she and Lila had done it together and had also bought food to feed Blazer. Her voice had a soft, almost playful tone, which made Setsuna chuckle. Crossing her fingers, she added that Lila was truly amazing for taking care of Blazer so naturally. She believed that treating someone kindly without harming them was important. Since she had always been surrounded by phantom beasts, she understood the importance of such bonds. Setsuna smiled, knowing that was exactly Lila's nature. However, he also realized he couldn't afford to rest forever. As soon as his body fully healed, he would have to begin his training in spirit magic. Carol then stood up, saying she had to return to class. She bid him farewell and asked him to bring Blazer with him next time. After finishing his meal, Setsuna opened a book, determined to absorb as much knowledge as possible about spirit magic. He read about the Great War that took place 200 years ago, where factions had battled across the continent. The followers of ancient magic had once tried to control other mages. Though the power of ancient magic was immense, only a handful could wield it. In the end, the mages had emerged victorious. However, history had shown that anyone possessing ancient magic became a target, as their mere knowledge was considered dangerous. Because of that, he needed to keep Blazer's true identity a secret, especially since this was a type of magic he hadn't even known in his past life. If he could control this power, he might have a chance to defeat the evil god. However, the events involving Leo and Giovanni had already taken place in his past life. He wondered if changing the course of history was truly the right thing to do. A few days later, they met again. Carl, still worried about Setsuna, asked if he was really going to start training right after recovering. He explaining that since it was the Academy's holiday, it was the perfect time. Drago clenched his fists, declaring that he wouldn't lose to him. Meanwhile, Lee gently petted Blazer, noticing that he seemed a little lonely. Setsuna thanked everyone for their help and said his goodbyes. They all wished him well and asked him to take care. Watching this, Liana was pleased to see that Setsuna had made such great friends. At that moment, the biggest concern was Blazer. Even though Leela had been helping him, Setsuna couldn't rely on her all the time. Later, Lunnell explained that they would be using transport lizards for their journey. While they were the best choice for long distances, they were also difficult to tame. The old man warned them that the lizards were fast, so if they got hurt, he wouldn't take responsibility. Setsuna, unfazed, approached one of the lizards. Carefully grabbing the strap, he climbed onto its back with ease. This surprised the old man, as most people struggled with their first attempt. With that, their journey began. Blazer stayed close to Setsuna, watching Lunnell. He asked if he was feeling alright, and Lunnell admitted that he wasn't used to this kind of travel. Further ahead, they spotted a group of people and came to a stop. The strangers didn't look like bandits, but they raised their weapons. Liano cautiously asked if they were those people. The strangers confirmed, stating that they were servants of the witch Morgana. Setsuna immediately recognized the name from the letter he had received from the director. Lunel explained that they were on their way to meet their master, and asked if the strangers had come to escort them. However, with a cold expression, one of the girls denied it. She said she had no interest in meeting a combat mage. Her voice sounded completely different, which surprised Setsuna. Lunel suspected Morgana was preparing something. He then explained that these weren't humans, but dolls created through alchemy. The girl then turned to Setsuna, recognizing him as the one chosen by a spirit. By accident, she demanded that he prove himself by defeating her dolls. Without warning, she unleashed a wave of energy at them. Setsuna quickly dodged the incoming attacks, and Lunel did the same. If a doll was this powerful, then its master had to be even stronger. The girls taunted him, saying he wasn't worthy of learning spirit magic. Setsuna smirked. They were underestimating him. If that was the case, he had no choice but to get serious. Our video ends here. Until next time.